I call to order the city council meeting for the city of Petoskey for the December 4th, 2023. I ask that you rise with me for the pledge of allegiance to the flag of the United States of America. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Would City Clerk Beck please call roll?
DeMorn, present. Shields.
Here.
Wagner.
Here.
Walker is absent, and Murphy.
We have a quorum. Next is the public hearing. Let's receive comments concerning a proposed special assessment rule that would spread cost of downtown area programs and services during 2024. As requested by the Downtown Management Board. We do have. Is there anyone who wishes to speak to City Council at this public hearing that's now open? We do have one letter. I'm writing today to express my concerns with the annual assessment. I do not feel it's necessary to charge property owners for community events. Our city has a considerable large tax base and should be able to work within their budget to plan community events. I pay thousands of dollars in taxes to own commercial property downtown every year. Around this holidays, I'm hit with the extra bill, and every year it increases. Why can't the city of Petoskey use the tax dollars, or better yet, parking fees to pay for these events? In fact, using parking fees would be obtaining funds from the very people who attend the events. Our curiosity has called other cities in the area to see if they have special assessments. After a few phone calls, I found another city that has another kind of special assessment, or business owners. This concerns me. I haven't found another one, excuse me. This concerns me. It makes me feel taken advantage of, and I believe the city has plenty of revenues to which to draw from. Which also concerns me is the vacancies that surround me 2 of the last 3 months. Traverse City makes no special assessment on business or property owners. They have a DDA, Downtown District Authority, which utilizes tax money for the events. Sheboygan, a city's council person was spoken to and said they have no special assessments. Harbor Springs has no special assessments to their knowledge. Waiting on a call back from a new staff member. Charlevoix, I spoke with Lindsay Dodson, DDA. They're using DDA and TIF funding, no special assessments. Point City. City Manager King said he's running events on tax revenue using TIF, tax increment financing, which uses the portion of the tax bill from the downtown district. The Chamber of Commerce and their DDA TIF district has their own fundraisers as well. I believe city has the revenue and tax base to afford its own events. It doesn't seem to be a common practice to be asking for extra money from businesses or property owners downtown and cities in the area. All of these other towns can balance their budget. Why without asking for more funds? Why can't we? I suggest that Petoskey run the city like a business, utilize tax dollars within their budget for events. Find creative solutions that doesn't require extra assessments. Perhaps excess parking money could be used for the events. Shouldn't more time be spent encouraging businesses to move downtown instead of assessing extra fees for being a downtown business? And thank you, Tiffany Leno. Thank you, Tiffany. Anyone else wish to speak to council at this point? There being none, I call the public hearing closed. Now we move to consent agenda, and that's the adoption of a proposed resolution that would include the following: those November 20th, 2023 regular session city council meeting minutes, as well as acknowledge the receipt of a report of other certain transactions administratively that have happened since November 20th, 2023. And I'm asking council for, do they have any questions additions, deletions? Mr. Wagner.
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Support.
A motion from Mr. Wagner, a second from Ms. Demore. Any other questions, council? I go to Ms. Beck for roll.
Wagner.
Yes.
Demore. Aye. Shields.
Yes.
Walker. Yes. Murphy.
Yes.
Remove that.
It's on the next one, isn't it?
No.
No, it's not that. B, yeah. Why don't we just do it at the time since we're already, yeah. Next, this is your opportunity. Oh, did I go for a roll? Yeah. We're all set. You good? Next, we'll go to public comments, and that is your opportunity to step forward. Give us your full name, full address, and you may address council with any matter or issue you wish to address them. I ask that you address council rather than the audience. Number one, and number two, you have the opportunity to do it right now. Does anybody wish to speak to council? If it's some matter that's on the agenda, I ask that you hold for that time unless you have to leave. Anybody in public? There's something red. You take care of that one. There'll be no public comments at this time. We'll move into the new business. It's the adoption of a proposed resolution that would authorize the city manager to execute agreements associated with the solar project at the Petoskey City landfill site. But for that, I'm going to turn it over to city manager Shane Horn.
Thank you, Mayor. One of the privileges of being a city manager is working with a team of staff and consultants and experts to really see transformational projects within a community. And I think what we're going to talk about tonight, when you hear the word landfill, may not, aspire those type of visions, but when we look at the potential reuse of a piece of property that's really is obsolete and is use all the adjectives you want, but it's challenging from a redevelopment, obviously, because of the cap that we deal with Eagle. So we've been working with our partners really before we submitted the letter of interest back in July of this year. You may recall Steve Donkersloot from Michigan Public Power Agency. He was with us early spring.
June, I believe.
Was it June? Okay. And presented about MPPA overall. Steve has been a very integral member of the team that has kind of put the agreements in the package that is in front of you in your packet. To the right of the podium is Michael McGeehan from GRP Engineering here in town. Really the interconnection agreement that is in this packet is really driven for the most part from his expertise. You all know, obviously, Mike Robbins, Public Works Director, and our city attorney, Jim Murray. This team of folks has really worked tirelessly over the past several months to really put this in front of you as it stands today. The hope and idea of this evening is to hear a presentation that really hopefully simplifies. The stuff in the packet is very technical, as you probably picked up pretty quickly as you read through it. It's very detailed, it's very technical in nature. We've had a lot of eyes on this from the start. The hope is once we're done with this and via the resolution, allowing the city manager, allowing the public works director, the city attorney with his review to push these documents forward, pending USDA ultimate approval and review. So I'd like to turn it over to Steve Donkersloot from MPPA. He's going to talk through a number of slides. I did print hard copies for you in front of you so you can follow along and create some notes if you'd like. But we're going to take a kind of a significant amount of time to walk through this because it's a big project for the city. We want to make sure that we get it right and we've addressed all of your concerns. So we're going to take some time to run through this, obviously open it up for your questions and feedback. We've got a great team here assembled to be able to answer your questions. So I'm going to turn it over to Steve.
Thank you, Shane, Mr. Mayor, Council. Really appreciate you allowing me and Michael McGeehan from GRP to present this evening. I would encourage all of you to ask questions, provide comments as we go throughout the presentation. There will be a time at the end, obviously, but I find with a project with as many topics as this, it's just best to hit them in stride, if you will. So to start, just want to provide an agenda that'll frame up the conversation we're going to have tonight. We'll start very, very high level. How did we get here in terms of the solar project we're going to be discussing tonight? And then what are your next steps? And it's pretty binary in nature. So we'll find out you really have two options in terms of next steps. Critical agreements in your packet. You should have a power purchase agreement, an interconnection agreement, and an easement agreement. Ultimately, at the end of the evening, you'll be asked to consider whether or not you'd like to move forward with this project or not. And to do that, Solar America, the developer we're going to be talking about, needs to make an application to the USDA no later than December 15th. In that application, they need to represent certain things to the federal government. And three of those things that they're representing are that certain agreements are either negotiated or put in place. So the bulk of today's conversation will be reviewing the key terms and conditions, considerations of those agreements. Don't believe that your leadership here at MPPA wants to make any sort of representation to Solar America or the USDA without this governing body's review and understanding of the key terms and conditions of those agreements. I will be covering the power purchase agreement, so that middle one. Michael McGeehan, the principal responsible for the system impact study that fed into the interconnection agreement, will cover that piece of the conversation. And Mike Robbins will be taking the easement agreement. Then we have some concluding thoughts. So with that said, how did we get here? This slide may look familiar to a slide that I used in a June PowerPoint. What does MPPA do for Petoskey? What does Petoskey ask of MPPA? MPPA is an extension of Petoskey. We work for you. You are our boss. By and large, Petoskey looks to MPPA to manage Petoskey's power supply portfolio. We do that by holistically looking at the marketplace, opportunities of investment in actual assets, contracts, market purchases, spot purchases. By and large, though, MPPA's transactions and investments that we've recommended to Petoskey have been utility scale investments that we call in front of the meter investments. So they're outside of your distribution system. MPPA, though, really should be looking at opportunities both locally, we call that behind the meter, as well as in front of the meter. But by and large, behind the meter local projects, being smaller in nature, haven't been cost effective, at least historically. That transitions to first quarter, second quarter of this year. The Inflation Reduction Act. Sure most folks are well aware that it's a recent large package of money that the federal government moved forward with. Several different opportunities under the Inflation Reduction Act have come about. One, the USDA PACE program, Powering Affordable Communities, we were made aware of, I think right around springtime, March, April. And a developer that MPPA has been talking with for a couple of years, Solar America, made us aware of this opportunity. In fact, most developers that are small scale in nature and even the large ones hadn't heard about this opportunity. This opportunity is unique in that it's for smaller rural communities. And the way that's defined is a population of 20,000 or less. A lot of programs, it's a free for all. and the municipals or the utilities that are larger in nature, that have significant resources, just can beat us to the punch. This was attractive in that it was just for rural 20,000 member communities. While MPPA has been talking with Solar America for a couple of years, as well as just many other developers, just wasn't the appetite to do something locally because of economics. When Solar America identified this opportunity, it caught our attention because the way this opportunity works is it's a forgivable loan that can be paired with investment or production tax credits. Almost, you can double dip, if you will. The problem was, though, when the opportunity was announced, there's a pretty short RIC in terms of announcement to application. And initially, that application was going to be due June 30th. The government extended it to July 10th. But one of the biggest hurdles once a program like this being announced is a line of sight into a project or property. Most municipals, if they haven't come to a community decision that they're ready to let go of a piece of property for 20, 25, 30 years for solar, we're probably not going to get from a program announcement to a community decision to say, yeah, we're willing to potentially depart with that property. And one moment. In time for an application submission. Yes.
Thanks, Steve. Sorry for the interruption. I just want to make clear on the record for anybody listening, the project loan that you're referencing would be between Solar America and USDA/Rural Utility Services. In other words, it's not a loan that involves the city.
That's correct.
Thank you.
That's correct. So when Solar America approached us with this opportunity, they had taken out independent land lease option agreements in several MPPA member communities, which gave us a line of sight into actual projects where they had already lease rights to develop solar. So MPPA is pursuing other projects with other members where Solar America already has land lease option agreements. However, I was aware of Petoskey's desire to execute upon more renewables, the desire to do something locally, and was aware of the landfill property and some studies that had previously been done. The economics just hadn't penciled at the time. So I contacted city administration as to the potential interest of throwing Petoskey's project in the hat of Solar America projects. At that time, there was interest. On July 10th, the USDA application, the letter of interest window opened. The way this opportunity works is it's a first come, first serve opportunity with a $1 billion pot of money. Sounds like a lot, but we're talking about the entire country. Solar America was the second applicant in the entire country. They submitted letters of interest for 10 total projects, less than a minute into the window being open. Right now, that $1 billion pot of money is more than 10 times subscribed. So there's a lot of interest in this program, and rightfully so because of how attractive economically this program is. Yes.
You sure you want me to keep interrupting?
Yeah,
Question.
yeah.
Okay.
I asked for it.
So you did. I just wanted to confirm because I have a lot of questions. So somewhere in our packet, it says that this is part of a portfolio of projects that would bring clean energy to 4 Michigan communities: Paw Paw, Petoskey, South Haven, and St. Louis. Are those 4 separate USDA applications, or is this like a joint?
The initial letter of interest filing was a combined portfolio. At this point, though, each project will stand on its own merits and is independent from any other project. So your decision has no impact on any other project and vice versa.
Thank you.
So they made a letter of interest submission July 10th. And why were we interested in the first place? One, the way this program work or this opportunity would work, it would be a contract between Petoskey and Solar America for a percentage of your forecasted portfolio. So that provides price certainty, if you will, for a percentage of your portfolio. Being municipals, being risk adverse, we like that. This project is forecasted to provide an economic benefit for Petoskey. I'll touch more about that later. It diversifies your power supply portfolio. You may look at that final dash where it says renewable power. Well, isn't that the same? In a way, yes. In a way, no. I mentioned earlier that MPPA's recommendations to this point have been for power supply outside of your system. your distribution system. This project is located within your distribution system, and that provides some unique strategic benefits. So not only does this diversify your portfolio with renewable power, but it also brings power supply locally. And final couple, this is a right size project. With any long-term commitment, 15, 20, 25 years, MPPA's perspective is we'd rather take a smaller bite of the apple than a larger one. And that's because over time, technology changes, preferences change, your load, how much energy is consumed here locally can go up and down. MPPA, just for risk management purposes, recommends that a long-term opportunity is approximately 10% or less of your total community need. And then finally, renewable power. It's not lost on me that you have a by 2035, 100% renewable goal. But beyond that, just recently passed into law here in the state of Michigan was a new energy bill rewrite, and that targets a 50% renewable standard by 2030 and 60% by 2035 with some other clean energy requirements. So from that perspective, we were interested in it. July 10th, I already mentioned, Soul America submitted the letter of interest. It was not MPPA, it was not Petoskey. August 30th, Soul America received an invitation to submit a formal application to the USDA. Again, very exciting, and USDA's communication to Soul America is that you're in unless you choose to be out. They're actively working towards this project's success. Obviously, to continue to be in, we have to represent interest, and Soul America, who's the applicant, has to complete a thorough application. But that application is due December 15th. Pretty quick turnaround, may seem like a lot of time. From MPPA's experience, though, typically a power purchase agreement takes anywhere from 4 to 6 months to negotiate. We've had to expedite that process. But beyond that, it wasn't just a power purchase agreement. We have interconnection agreements and system impact studies like Michael will be talking about in a few minutes. Again, that formal application is due no later than December 15th. If that doesn't happen, effectively, this project would move to the back of that line. You know, it'd be $10 billion and $1, and we probably would never get in. So what have we been doing over the last couple, 3 months? A lot. There have been engineering studies and work primarily performed by GRP Engineering, contract negotiations with Soul America. There have been city staff and legal work as it relates to the easement agreement. We've had meetings with the township and county here in person, a site visit, and additional due diligence. So a lot of activity in a relatively short period of time. And, you know, some of it was touch and go, to be frank. We weren't going to get to this point just because we had to feel good about the documents and the project itself. My final slide before I'm going to turn over to Michael. So 2 options here. You have the choice to wind efforts down, no recourse, no harm, no liability to the city. Obviously, time, consulting dollars have been spent, limited in nature to get to this point, but you can choose to walk away, no recourse, or you can choose to move forward with Soul America. And again, to do that, certain representations to them need to be made. And that's where the various agreements are so important. And that's what we're going to cover tonight. Already talked about the due date being December 15th. And I'm going to turn it over to Michael now to talk about the first of the 3 big items, the interconnection agreement.
Yes.
So this is a power purchase agreement question. So in Exhibit A, it talks about, this is page 84, if anybody wants to look at it. Okay.
Let people get to 84.
And I do have a portion of the slide deck exclusively about the power purchase agreement.
Okay,
So I'm happy to take it now, or we can wait till we get to the PPA.
it's all good.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Pleasure to present to the council tonight to walk through the 2 items that GRP Engineering provided the most assistance on. And that is the system impact study and the interconnection agreement, which really the 2 tie together because the system impact study has to be done to then show what is required in that agreement. as I go through this, of course, my intent is not to be over technical, but being on the engineering side, that seems to happen. Please throw out questions, comments if I'm using an acronym or a term that is not understood. Please pause me as I go through this. So the system impact study that the GRP Engineering completed for the city of Petoskey for this 3 megawatt solar interconnection project assessed the city's distribution system and how it would respond to and what capacity is there to accept this 3 megawatts of solar generation. There's 4 key tasks that we do when we do a system impact study for what we call a distributed generation asset, which this project is. We look at the power flow into the distribution system. We look at the voltage fluctuations that occur or could occur on your distribution system. We look at the protection requirements that are required not only for the generation side, but for your distribution system. And then we evaluate to see if this generation could actually create what is called an island, if it could generate and serve load without any connection to your system, which we don't want. So those are the 4 key tasks that we go through when we do that. And then we look at this under different loading cases. We look at it under summer maximum peak loading, and then we look at it under your shoulder, what we call the shoulder season, which is spring and fall, and looking at minimum load cases, non-air conditioning times when electrical load is down. And we obviously do those assessments during daylight hours. Whereas the site at Howard Road, south of Lears, which I believe everybody's familiar with, but just including this slide so that you can see, we brought in from Solar America the conceptual site plan on Howard Road between River and Howard. And the point of interconnection to the electrical system, to the city of Petoskey's distribution system, will be located on Howard Road side of the site, south of Lears. Just some quick system background information so that you understand your distribution system as I walk through the analysis portion. This generation site will connect to your circuit Petoskey 3, which is served out of the Petoskey or Sheridan Road substation next to the Department of Public Works building. It's approximately 1.25 miles from the substation out to the generation site. The upline transmission source that feeds the city of Petoskey system is a Consumers Energy 46 kV transmission line. That is important because as we go into the next slide, you'll see we have to ensure that we do not actually push generation back onto the transmission system and that it all remains within the city of Petoskey's distribution system. And then the existing Petoskey 3 circuit actually doesn't extend all the way down to the Howard Road landfill site. This project, it'll take about a quarter mile of new underground to extend out to the point of interconnection at the landfill solar generation site.
Can you tell me where that ends and where you would make the connection?
Absolutely. So moving to the next slide, just a small snip of the distribution circuit map from our system modeling here. Up on the top of the north end is the Petoskey substation, located again on Sheridan Road, right at DPW. The blue lines that you see are that Petoskey 3 distribution circuit. And then the proposed solar and site, again on Howard Road, south of Lears. And it's shown as just a little bit of a different dashed line. I apologize that it looks very similar. But from Lears Road south, it's about a quarter mile along Howard Road is where the new underground would be routed.
Lears Road. And.
Yep.
Howard Road Hill, we're on the south side of Lears Road.
Does that help answer your question?
I was thinking, if it was, I was wondering, I know where the Petoskey substation is, I thought you meant that there was somewhere that was closer where the circuit ended, you'd have to connect. So that's, and it's like,
Okay. Shifting into the analysis side in the system impact study, the first task that we have to do is to review circuit and upline substation transformer loading in comparison to the maximum solar generation that can occur, looking at that maximum output. This slide here with this table shows you the Petoskey Circuit 3, the substation recloser, what our load is there under daytime maximum conditions, peak summer conditions, and daytime minimum peak conditions, which is your shoulder, spring, fall. And then the next row down is the load, your current historical loading on Petoskey substation transformer number 1. There's 2 transformers in the substation. Transformer 1 serves 4 circuits, including Petoskey 3, which is where the solar generation will connect to. When you look at the very right-hand column, you'll see the 3,000 kilowatts or 3 megawatts of generation, which is the peak output from this proposed generation site. And when you look at it in comparison to Petoskey Substation Recloser 3, you can see that it actually can exceed under minimum and maximum conditions the load, the historical load that is on that circuit. So this generation will take care of all of the load on that circuit. And then what happens with the excess? That excess flows back into the substation and will serve additional load that is on transformer number 1. It does not ever exceed the minimum daytime load, which is 4,200 kilowatts. That is, again, key. I mentioned a minute ago that we cannot flow back power onto the transmission line that serves the city. This proves that it will not.
So bottom line for the laywoman is it can accommodate the load.
It absolutely can accommodate the load.
Thank you.
And does that mean literally no electrons are going outside the system, or we're just talking?
That is correct. They will not go outside the city of Petoskey owned electrical system.
Is that different than a utility scale solar project? Like we're part of the one down in Mason, so. Is that would that be because of this is an agreement with just the city of Petoskey, whereas the one in Mason has multiple players that need to travel further? Is that good understanding?
When you get to that utility scale size generation, and those connect to the transmission system, and then there are agreements that allow for wheeling or moving power across transmission systems. Your agreement with Consumers Energy for your transmission connection does not allow you to generate excess and push back,
Okay.
Which is a standard agreement.
Okay, thank you.
So the analysis that we completed on your system using the computerized system model that we have, that we built and have for the city of Petoskey electric system, all the analysis are based on IEEE and IEC standards. So this is not something that we don't make these up. These are internationally recognized standards that are utilized to do the analysis. So again, we look at what the system maximum minimum peak, really, we looked at that in the previous slide to make sure that we're not flowing back onto the transmission system. Looking at the power flow or the flow from that solar generation during a steady state condition, just a normal generation condition, we look at all of the equipment and the conductors on the distribution circuit, and we ensure that we have the capacity to bring this generation on. The results of the study say you do. No capacity issues in the distribution system. We also looked at the voltage. What would the system voltage be with the generation on, the generation off, and under the different peak and min peak conditions? There are no circuit voltage issues outside of the established standards on your system with this generation added.
So I don't know if this question pertains to flicker or not, but since solar is something we, have sun all the time here and it comes on and off. And I also haven't had a chance to find out what percentage of our power this would generate. But would this have any, would that fluctuation, I don't know if that's flicker, is it? Okay.
It is, absolutely.
Have any impact on consumers?
Absolutely. So flicker, I'll try to define that as well, because flicker is a term that we use when we assess generation, especially solar generation. Flicker it's a rapid change in voltage that actually can be visually seen in lights. And so if you have full sun and a cloud comes over, so the solar generation site would go from maximum generation all of a sudden down to maybe minimum. As it ramps down and ramps back up, you can see a change in voltage through lighting. So the standards are set. 3% is the maximum amount of flicker that is allowed. So the computer software that we use calculates the flicker under these different loading conditions, your maximum summer peak and then your minimum shoulder season. And on that distribution circuit, based on the load that is there and the generation, under maximum conditions, the flicker would be 1.1%. Under minimum load, shoulder season would be 1%. Both of those values are below that established 3% flicker level.
I believe you asked, you're asking, assumption that this 3% would provide for the synergy and megawatts.
I think it's 10 megawatts out of 18 at peak. Is that right?
But peak, system peak, it's 18 to 19 megawatts is the city of Petoskey's peak load in the summer. So this is 3 megawatts.
16%. Thereabout. The winter it would be more like 25%.
Well, I think we're talking energy versus capacity. So energy for the city of Petoskey is going to be about a 5% add of renewable based on the megawatt hours of the city's yearly consumption. Right, based on what this solar will put out. I think we have a number that you'll present here that'll just explain that.
Did you say 5% add of renewables? Thank you. Thank you.
It can, I'll just quickly digress as the questions are coming on energy versus demand. From the consulting side in the analysis in the system impact, we are looking at demand. We're looking at load. And when Steve gets in, he can share more on the energy side, different percentages, different numbers. Apologies that the difference between energy and demand. They're two different items, and we're assessing it based on demand. All right, moving on, and the last task that we look at with the system impact study is interconnection protection. So protection again of both your distribution system and the generation site itself. We look at what is the contribution from the generation to your distribution system if there were a fault. A fault is, for instance, a tree coming down and touching the line. When that happens, generation pushes additional current out onto the system. This solar generation site will only produce a minimal 5% increase in fault current. Contribution does not exceed any of the interrupting capabilities of any of the equipment. So your system is good as far as the protection side. At the solar generation site, a recloser will need to be installed. A recloser is effectively a smart circuit breaker. It's a breaker that opens and closes the distribution circuit. That will be required at the site to protect not only the generation, but also your distribution circuit as well. And then I talked about islanding, when I first started here, we did assess to see if the distribution circuit could be island. In the event, if it disconnects from the recloser at the substation. And we look at that by assessing what is the minimum load on the circuit and the maximum generation load that can be put on. And it's very high. We showed that in that first table. You can generate much more capacity than that circuit needs. So what can happen if the substation circuit recloser opens, the generation site can actually serve all of the load on that circuit and create an electrical island that is not desired in utilities. So with that, then a communication scheme called a direct transfer trip scheme is required between the substation recloser and the solar site generation recloser. So they'll talk to each other, we'll program them. So if the substation trips offline, the generation site must trip offline, so you do not have what's called an islanding condition.
So again, just plain English understanding here. Are we looking at the concern of just theoretically, hypothetically, something bad happens with the solar and we don't want it to back up into our system? Is that what this is in place for?
That recloser does both, exactly as you stated. If there were either way, if there was a problem at the generation site to protect the city of Petoskey's distribution system, it would disconnect the generation and vice versa.
It's like a backflow for water.
Yes, that's a good way to look at it.
Thank you.
Thank you. There we go. All right, so required system modifications that summarize the end of the system impact study. First, you have to extend your distribution system that 1/4 mile down Howard Road to get to the site to interconnect to it. And then you have to install that direct transfer trip communication scheme between the substation and the solar generation site. That's done with fiber optic cabling between the two. That then brings us into the interconnection agreement. The interconnection agreement is that legal agreement between the city of Petoskey and the distributed generation owner operator, in this case, Solar America. This document, which is again one of those 3 key pieces, covers the technical interconnection. What is it required? What equipment is required to connect this generation to the system? This is why the system impact study is done, so we know what is needed to connect it to your system. It sets the demarcation, or what we term the delivery point for the generation onto your system. It covers technical requirements, including metering, protection and the protection equipment, maintenance and testing, not only initially when it's commissioned and brought online, but over routine times to ensure that the protection and the generation site is operating based on its original conditions and specifications. And then also, this document provides the procedures for the distribution system upgrades that are required. And that includes, from the dollar standpoint, deposits, payment schedules, and I'll let Steve talk on that when we get to that section. The interconnection agreement does provide for the safe operation of interconnecting generation facilities into the utilities distribution system, including access for utility personnel and up-to-date contact information, so City of Petoskey electrical staff know who to contact in the event of a problem. And to be able to have access from you as the utility side to the site to disconnect if necessary.
So just a point of clarification then regarding the means of disconnection. Will that be installed and controlled by the developer or by the city?
Yes, the means of disconnecting, and I'll move to the next slide, which is our one line diagram. There will be a switch which is installed by the owner operator on their site. They will purchase it, they will place it in, that will allow for disconnecting of the solar generation site. They will have, as owner operator, will have access to it, and you as a utility will have access. So in the event that needs to be disconnected for an emergency situation, you as the city, your staff will have access to it. And so going back, curtailments, or when this document does state, when can you, as a utility, allow for a curtailment or a disconnection of the solar generation? Emergency conditions. If there is a condition that is a danger to people or to your distribution system, you will have the legal right to be able to disconnect it. If there's a system outage, tree falls on that distribution circuit and the substation recloser opens, you will have the legal right to open the recloser at the site and disconnect it. Or for maintenance, if you need to do maintenance on your distribution system, you will have the right per this agreement to disconnect. And it goes through the amount of time, reasonable amount of time to make those curtailments. We do include in the system impact study, and I have a slide here that just shows a small portion of this, of the electrical system, showing the demarcation, which is a heavy dashed line between the distributed generator owner operator and the city of Petoskey. Their equipment, their generation, their transformers, their gang switch, and your upline equipment, including the metering that the interconnection requirement requires, the upline recloser, and a direct transfer trip scheme back to your substation. So summarizing that interconnection agreement and what are those technical requirements? Again, it requires that metering be placed in, so you know from a revenue side how much generation has come off of the generation site. The protection that's required, that on-site recloser and the communication scheme back to the substation. The maintenance and testing, both from that initial side. Routine maintenance and testing based on IEEE international standards. And then the required distribution system upgrades to extend your distribution and put in that communication scheme. Those are all part of this technical interconnection agreement that was built off of the system impact study. And really with that, I will turn it back over to Steve, but I'll answer any questions on that portion of it. He'll get into the end of the interconnection agreement.
Ms. Walker.
Thanks, Mayor. Could you answer, or could Mike Robbins answer, the city's about 72% underground of our utilities at this point. I don't believe the Clarion Standish Avenue has gone with underground of the utilities, and I understand that it's gonna be a circuit underground extension, so it will be underground. It's not gonna be above ground. How will that work out?
I can answer that. The existing Petoskey 3 circuit is overhead on Clarion to River Road and then is underground on Howard up to Lears. And this again would just be an extension built underground, extending the underground system to the site.
Mr. Moore.
Who's constructing that?
That would be constructed by City of Petoskey or City of Petoskey designated contractor.
Who's responsible for when this thing eventually dies, the solar system dies, who's responsible for the cleanup?
And I think that gets into a couple of documents. Do you want to handle that, Steve?
Can I address that as soon as I get up there in just a minute?
Sure.
Sure.
Is this stuff you're gonna cover?
That question I will, yes.
Okay, all right,
You might have other questions that.
yeah. In general, I guess, Mike, I asked you this, will this area be fenced and secured?
Yes.
It has to per code, yes.
Okay. What's the percent of time that in a year's time that this will be operational? Is there a requirement that it has to be up and running any specific amount of time? You said that there are agreements on how long maintenance takes and stuff like this. You know, does the system up and running 50% of the time, 99% of the time? Is there can that be identified or not really?
Yeah, Steve, if I'm gonna have Steve take that.
Terms of uptime, there is no built-in percentage whereby Solar America has to have the project available. With that said, they are only making money when the project's producing power, either paying back their equity investor or lender. So they have a natural inherent incentive for that project to be online. I'll talk about in a couple of slides. There is performance security in which Solar America is posting to the city, in which they have to operate the project according to best utility practice and certain requirements. So there can be financial recourse to the developer if they're not operating as they should.
Solar panels have a timeline of life, correct?
They do.
And what will this have?
35 to 40 years.
Okay, and this agreement's for
25
years?
I'll hit on that one here on another slide too. I'll make sure if I don't, just stop me and say, Steve, you
Okay,
told me you were going to.
thank you. I won't worry about it. Thank you for those are my questions. Anyone else have a question at this point? Continue on, sir.
So Michael, at the very end, talked about the interconnection facility upgrades. That would be the responsibility of Petoskey. As Michael said, the city or a contractor hired by the city would be responsible to construct those. It's my understanding that Michael and GRP for members like Petoskey typically put together bid packages, RFPs, and award bids and manage that contract relationship. With that said, even though Petoskey is responsible for the construction and they would have a contract or be performing this work in-house, per the interconnection agreement, Solar America is to make an 80% deposit payment to the city for the all-in forecasted cost of Petoskey's interconnection upgrades. That estimated cost is a number produced by GRP Engineering, and includes contingency, ongoing construction inspection and engineering. That total cost as of today is $324,000. Ultimately, that 80% would be used by Petoskey to submit the invoice payments to the contractor. And then there's the ability to true up at the end for that final 20%, or if it's more or less. Power purchase agreement contract rate that we're going to talk about here on the next couple slides, embedded in that rate is the cost of the interconnection upgrades that Solar America is paying you. And this provides a couple of advantages. Because the project is less than 5 megawatts, the federal government allows for a 30% credit of those interconnection upgrade costs. So you're getting a 30% effective discount on that $324,000 number. And then two, if God forbid something did happen to this project, say a tornado came through or a bad storm and it destroyed the project, you're not left with a stranded investment or asset. You're only paying for that interconnection upgrade as power is produced over time. So you're paying for the asset and consuming the benefit in parallel, which is good, reduces your financial exposure. Yes.
I don't know if this question's for you, Steve, or maybe for Jim. But in terms of that final 20%, like what's the timing of that? Is that before construction begins on the panels, or how are we making sure that that gets paid?
That final 20% is due after completion of Petoskey's interconnection upgrades. There is the means and ability to collect more before that 20%, but they're making that 80% payment prior to any construction starting.
I don't think that answered my question respectfully. What's the impetus if they don't pay the 20%, or how are we ensuring that second portion gets paid? That's my question. Is there a letter of credit? Is this what we're talking about when we see the development security?
The development security is in the power purchase agreement, so no, you would not draw on the development security. Ultimately, there's a contingency whereby the expected contract award will be less than the deposit they're making.
Do you understand my question, Jim, or no?
Well, it's in the PPA agreement, isn't it? It's not in the easement. The 20%.
The interconnection agreement, it said.
Obviously, they wouldn't be hooked up. I mean,
Well, that's my question.
yeah, I think we ultimately have the power.
So the 20% has to be paid for the hookup.
Correct.
Yes,
Thank you.
yes. Sorry about that.
And I would just make one comment that they're physically going to hook up to our system. So, and we're the installers of that system to that landfill interconnect area. So we would have full control of, we're not hooking you up until it's complete.
Thank you.
Transitioning over to the power purchase agreement, several key terms and conditions. It was already covered that this agreement would be between Petoskey and Solar America. So while MPPA helped evaluate, negotiate, get to this point, at the end of the day, this is a Petoskey Solar America agreement. The term length that's been negotiated is 25 years. There are project purchase option dates in that agreement, as well as extension dates. Tax equity is embedded in this agreement, and that's being harvested by Solar America and others. After that tax equity has been harvested on the 6th anniversary of the power purchase agreement, Petoskey would have a one-time option to purchase the agreement mid-contract. At the end of the 25-year term, there's also the ability to exercise a purchase option. There's also the ability to extend your contract after the 25th year. That would be a negotiated extension at that time. As mentioned, the project expected lifespan is 35 to 40 years. Solar America in their models believes there's at least 35 to 40 years of revenue. If Petoskey did neither of those things, ultimately, Solar America would look to contract with Petoskey under a PURPA type contract, Public Utility Policy Regulatory Act in the 70s, whereby Petoskey would payment to Solar America would be for Petoskey's avoided cost. So you would effectively be neutral to the project being there and you paying for power, because you would have to buy the power from the open marketplace otherwise. The commercial operation milestone date as of now, and I'm going to reiterate as of now because that date can fluctuate for certain reasons, is December 31st, 2025. Again, the project is 3 megawatts in peak size. In terms of its energy production, we forecast just over 5,000 megawatt hours of energy will be produced. Mike Robbins made the comment earlier that this is approximately 5% of Petoskey's need, just over 5%, 5.1% in year one. That's a forecasted number. Obviously, how much energy will be produced depends on the weather of that year. And that's like a P50 number. If you had a bell curve, that would be the 50th percentile on a given year. It'll vary from that 50th percentile. I would note that's a year one forecast. Panels do degrade over time, and the manufacturer has indicated there's an annual 0.45% degradation factor. So every year this project would be expected to do a little bit less. The products that Petoskey would be taking within the contract, there are 4: energy, capacity, environmental attributes, which are renewable energy credits. It's the means by which you demonstrate how renewable you are, and in ancillary services. Each of those products has a different value if you unbundle them. Now you're paying a per megawatt hour energy rate for all of those products, but MPPA through our modeling and forward curves of those different products, can calculate the expected forecasted financial benefit of this project. And it's important to note that we're looking at each one of those products on its own merits when I talk about the expected financial forecast benefit on the next slide. Any questions there? Mr. Shields.
See, the 0.45% annual degradation is not related to the need, the 5% need. That's talking about just the panels.
Correct.
Yeah, thank you.
Correct.
Ms. Walker.
Are you gonna extrapolate on what some of the ancillary services are?
Right now, in MISO, in which where Petoskey sits, there aren't many, if any. There used to be a reactive voltage support revenue that was eliminated. There's frequency response and regulation products and other RTOs. That market hasn't been developed in MISO. Really, this is just an option that we're preserving for you in the event that in the next 25 years, different products are developed, you would have the rights to whatever those products are.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, so for the economics, everybody's favorite part, the contract rate that's been negotiated, which includes your interconnection cost upgrades that they're reimbursing you for, is $58.14 per megawatt hour. That is a fixed rate for the entire 25-year period. When we compare that contract to other project opportunities, utility scale, large opportunities consuming thousands of acres of land, we're seeing projects in the high 60s per megawatt hour to the mid to high 70s. Usually, these types of projects are costing this much more than your large projects. This speaks to the benefit of that USDA PACE forgivable loan. The financial commitment that's forecasted is an all-in total payment to Solar America over the 25 years of $7 million. Again, this will vary depending on how much power is actually produced over the period. That comes out to just around $280,000 per year. We would expect your payment in year 1 would be higher. Year 25 would be lower because over time, the panels are producing less power.
In our following up on costs, so in our resolution, it states that Petoskey Affordable Solar LLC, Solar America would quote, sell and deliver electricity produced to the city at a below market rate.
Yes.
Can you speak to that, please?
The utility scale large projects that I was referencing, the ones that consume hundreds or thousands of acres, right now, those projects are pricing $10 to $20 more per megawatt hour. So if Petoskey were to enter into a contract through MPPA for a large scale solar project, you would expect to pay instead of $58, $68 to $75 to $78. So we're saying that your $58 price point is below other market opportunities that you have right now.
So given the scale of this project, I don't know who this question is for, but what kind of impact might consumers in Petoskey expect to see? Would their bills remain the same, essentially, higher, lower? I understand those are projections.
This would be forecasted to provide a rate benefit to Petoskey, and I'm going to talk about that here in the third bullet point. I state that this project is forecasted to provide a significant economic benefit compared to alternatives. In the previous slide, I talked about there was 4 products that you're essentially buying from this contract. The ancillary service product really doesn't have a value right now, but when MPPA looks at the forward cost or value of energy, capacity, and renewable energy credits, we say, if you didn't enter into this contract and get those 3 products from this contract and you had to otherwise go buy them in the marketplace, how much more or less would it cost you to do that? And our forecast reflects that as of today, to buy the same products over 25 years elsewhere instead of through this contract would cost Petoskey in excess of $3 million more than it would to enter into this contract. So this contract right now is in the money. But this contract also provides a unique opportunity because it's local and you are connected to Consumers Energy's 46 kV transmission system, as Michael hit on earlier. You make a monthly demand payment every month to Consumers Energy for your peak demand during their coincident peak hour. You are allowed to peak shave or generate locally to reduce your load during that period of time. So there's this other value stream when the project is producing during that monthly peak coincident peak hour, you have to pay that many megawatts or kilowatts less to Consumers Energy. That value is not in the $3 million number I gave you. That would be an additional value of, we forecast between $700,000 and $3 million. So tremendous value. That $700,000 is just around $6 per megawatt hour in value, and that $3 million is another 24. And that's quite a wide range. We tried to look at kind of your bookends under a conservative estimate of what that value could be and an aggressive estimate. But when we compare a contract payment of $7 million and you're getting north of 10 up to $13 million, this contract already has a forecasted $3 to $6 million of value. And that's how much money your ratepayers would expect to save over the contract period.
Mr. Moore.
I was interested to see that this is a 25-year contract rate. Is that standard in the industry? Because I mean, obviously that fluctuates, doesn't it? I would think.
We have 30-year agreements with the other power sources, don't we?
Well, ultimately, to get this project financed, the developer is going to require a term length that's lengthier in time. All MPPA agreements are 20 or 25 years. If you chose to do an escalated contract, you could do that, and your year one price would be less than 58.14, but then your rate would adjust by 2% every year for the 25 years. MPPA evaluated the mark-to-market benefit under both a fixed price and an escalating price. And just due to the forecasted price of power in future years, the better value for you at this point in time is the fixed price contract.
Thank you.
Moving down to that fourth bullet point, security, there is development security, and that's pre-commercial operation date security, $50,000 per megawatt, so that's $150,000. It's the recourse that would be due to you if the project did not get developed. There are certain ways or reasons in which they can get out of making that payment, but they're limited in nature. As mentioned earlier, there's also post-commercial operation date security of $150,000. And then finally, Solar America, for the entire term of the contract, is responsible for the solar project's construction, operation, and maintenance. When I make that statement, I'm not talking about your interconnection facilities, that $324,000. I'm talking about everything else. I think this is close to the last slide here. Final set of other key terms and conditions. Lengthy agreement. A lot's going on, but it's important to understand how that commercial operation milestone date of December 31st, 2025 can move around. There's the concept called an excused delay, whereby that date can move from December 31st, 2025 back. What are the reasons that that could happen? If there was a force majeure event, an act of God, if you will, Petoskey's failure to perform their obligations under the interconnection agreement. So things under your direct control. If you're not doing what you're supposed to be doing, seems reasonable they can move that date out further. If you were to breach the contract in some way, that would mean they cannot perform their duties. They can extend that COD back. Then two more unique pieces of this contract that we haven't seen in other MPPA contracts, but they're very reasonable. I'm sure Michael can back me up on this one. Solar America is required to submit a purchase order for the transformer of this project after certain events happen, and they're required to do so after 10 business days. They're also required to get verification from the seller that the transformer is expected to be delivered in 1 year. If that doesn't happen, every day after 1 year, the COD can be moved back. And I think, Michael, we've seen material deliveries all over the board, and it seemed like a reasonable ask in today's supply chain market. And then finally, certain actions that Solar America would like to take are dependent on getting that conditional loan commitment from USDA. This is a federal program. It's the first of its kind. The government could shut down. Who knows what could happen? They're expecting conditional loan by June 1st of next year. If that doesn't happen, they're not able to start pulling the trigger or making certain decisions on their end, so that can push out the COD. Does that make sense to everyone? And then termination of the PPA. How could this PPA ultimately be terminated? And I picked the 5 biggest ways in which that could happen. If there was an event of default, which could happen either by Petoskey or Solar America, there's the opportunity to cure default, and there's a list of defaults in the contract. But if they were to default and they didn't cure it within a certain period of time that's specified in the agreement, you would have the ability to terminate. If there was a force majeure event whereby Solar America declared force majeure and that event lasted for more than 1 year, you would have the opportunity to cancel. They would not. That's why it's unilateral. A casualty event, fire, tornado again. This is a bilateral decision. If there was a casualty event and you wanted the project rebuilt, they're required to have insurance. The project would have to get rebuilt. It would only have to be a mutual decision in order for the project to terminate or the PPA to terminate. And then the final couple, a no fault event. If Petoskey, or excuse me, Solar America claims a no fault event, and there are 5 very specifically listed. I'll give you an example, a subsurface condition that wasn't reasonable for Solar America to be aware of. If that were to be found out later, that would render the project non-viable or uneconomic. They're going to say, okay, we're sorry, we wish it would have worked out. We're going to declare a no fault event. They can walk away. No securities paid to you. There's 5 of those. And then the final way this PPA can terminate, the 25 years runs out and both sides do not renew or you don't buy them out. If there aren't any questions, I'm going to turn it over to Mike Robbins. Mr. Shields.
Thanks, Steve. I just want to address the buying out. You just mentioned the purchase options, and maybe couch that question as could the city of Petoskey be doing this without Solar America is one, and what would be the economic benefit? I clearly see the value of Solar America to get through this process and get they're taking a lead for sure. Is there the economic benefit to owning this as a city? And maybe that's something that the city would want to look 6 years out to potentially do. But so can you explain a little bit how the economics would change if we were the owners and Solar America wasn't part of the equation, or if that's not impossible?
I think it would be challenging for Petoskey or MPPA, rather, most MPPA members to be the exclusive lead here. One, we don't have EPC, engineering, procurement, construction, contract relationships. And right now that market's very tight. Even very large scale developers can't get the EPCs they need. 2, we don't have contracts or relationships for equipment, materials like modules and panels. Those have been very difficult to come by. And then project development's just difficult and requires taking a healthy level of risk. You know, there's going to be risks on both sides of the table here, but typically municipals are more risk adverse.
Right.
And I think for those 3 reasons, a project like this just makes sense to move forward with a developer.
Okay. Thank you. And just one follow-up question to that then. Does the city of Petoskey have a limit on how much energy we can generate locally as a MPPA member?
We're a project-based agency, so the answer is no. Practically speaking, though, from Michael's comment, you cannot export power. So that would limit how much you can do, and if a resource has to be dispatched down. And then 2, you do have existing contracts through MPPA. You probably don't want to have more energy than you need, because then you're exposed to selling that energy at whatever the market price of that is. It's not now being used to serve Petoskey's load. It's more of a financial speculative type play, so we like to make sure a member isn't over 100% of their need. So practically speaking, there probably is a limit. Legally, there isn't.
We're nowhere near that though, are we?
No,
So there's not a worry if this.
there's room to do more.
I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Oh, boy.
Thanks for the French lesson. Force majeure.
So you've heard a lot with the two agreements, the interconnect and the power purchase agreement. So now we talk about the land. So the Petoskey and Soul America agreement is between the two entities. And it addresses two areas, the solar project area and the interconnection project area. And what that does is it ties the project together through the easement. So we did the review and the negotiation was performed by city staff, legal counsel. Jim Murray was highly involved in this. I want to just back up one quick second here. We do have Lisa Richardson, who is virtually listening and will be available from Tetra Tech. We should probably introduce her earlier, but she is on the line and she can help with any environmental questions in regards to the landfill. But anyway, we did the review and the negotiation was performed by Petoskey staff. And I just want to make it clear that the easement agreement has to be executed by December 15th. But realizing the short wick that we've all had here to get this all put together, the boundary survey was just performed last week by Soul America. They were on the property with the surveyor. Exhibits that Michael McGeehan has been working on. The boundaries and specific areas still have to be defined. So the easement language does speak to the fact that this will be amended after it's executed. This will provide Soul America the site control, which is part of the USDA application. So by December 15th, Steve had mentioned earlier that the PPA will not be executed. The interconnection agreement will not be executed, but the easement agreement will be executed with authorizations. One of the tricky ones with this site, it is a landfill. It's regulated by the state of Michigan. There is a restricted covenant that's attached to that landfill that states there's no excavating, grading, filling without approvals.
Mhm.
The easement language in the agreement speaks to that, where they have, the Soul America will have to submit a proposal to the state that will talk about the constructability of this solar facility. It will talk about the cat protections, maintenance and repairs, and the inspections and oversight. Tetra Tech, I just introduced Lisa. Thank you for being here tonight. Keeps us in compliance with that landfill with the state environmentally. So they do annual monitoring. She has been very instrumental with helping us work through the details with the state. We have talked to the state. The state was actually on site with us with a walkthrough. They did show some positives towards, this is a great use for the landfill. This is exactly what they would like to see. So we have that covered in the easement agreement. There's lots of language in there about interaction with the state and approvals. So just to put it all in perspective, the conditions of this easement agreement, although it is executed, we still have to have approvals from the state of Michigan, Eagle. The USDA has to approve, and the city has to execute the PPA and interconnection agreements. Until those agreements are executed, this easement agreement is not effective. It's basically telling the USDA that Soul America has site control, that we work through the easement. We also have to have approvals from Bear Creek Township and Emmett County. We have engaged with Bear Creek, the supervisor, and Emmett County Planning and Zoning. And Soul America will go through that process for the approvals that are required.
Mr. Moore,
So Mike, in connection with that you just described, I'm wondering, would neighbors or people in the area have an opportunity to be heard?
They will, that will be through the Emmett County, it's actually will be Bear Creek and Emmett County Planning and Zoning will be fully engaged with that process.
And then just as a follow-up, is it your understanding there won't be anything else on this site? There won't be signage, or it's just gonna be panels, or will there be?
It'll be panels fenced in. I'm not sure on signage. There may be some safety signage that may be on the fencing as such, but there's nothing that I'm hearing that's gonna be a large sign.
Okay.
Um,
Thank you.
yeah, just one other quick comment. There is an educational piece to this project. Soul America has reached out, and as part of the USDA grant application, it's a positive to show that there may be some interaction with the local school district, college potentially, and we're working on that as we speak to try to get Soul America something by the 15th. That would indicate that there would be an opportunity from an educational standpoint also for this facility. So I'll take any questions, if there are any in regards to the easement agreement. Thank you.
I just make a quick comment. I think it was the attorney for the MPPA used the expression that these documents speak together. There's other legal terms I use, you know, whether they're integrated and so forth, but I thought speaking together was appropriate because the PPA agreement's complicated, the interconnection agreement's complicated. And Mike used the word executed a lot, and I'm sure no one thinks someone's going to get shot, but let me explain. And if you go to paragraph 6 of the easement, it might, and you don't have to go there, but I'll explain it. In particular, too, if you look at the resolution, the request is to authorize the city manager to sign it now, and you're probably wondering why. 6, I defined the easement date and came up with the term effective date. So you could sign this tonight. It kind of doesn't matter because it's not effective until number 1, Eagle gives written approval to the terms of the easement and the proposal that Soul America is doing. Written approval from Emmett County and Bear Creek Township. That the PPA agreement is not only authorized by the Department of Agriculture, but it's signed by the parties, and same thing with the interconnection agreement. So those, the fancy term lawyers like to use is a condition precedent. It's really a contingency. Those are all contingencies before the easement is effective. So the execution of it just means it's really a fancy word for just saying you're signing it. You as council do need, should you so choose, to approve the resolution, you would be authorizing the city manager. As Mike mentioned, and I think Steve did, there will be, excuse me, there'll be some changes. The exhibits aren't all there. Because of the December 15th deadline and other deadlines, it's just easier to put in the resolution to give the city manager some leeway. If there are some changes, and we put in the resolution, we thought hopefully is reasonable to you, that Shane, as city manager, would have the authority, provided MPPA agrees with the changes. You know, you're a member of MPPA, and myself as city attorney, because there will be some changes. So we'll have a staff review, an MPPA review, probably particularly just the exhibits. I'm not expecting them to take the easement agreement and say, well, you know, section 9, we want this or that. I'm guessing it's just the exhibits in the detail. And so it's really the Department of Agriculture's deadline that requires us to seek if you can approve it tonight. And knowing there'll be hopefully slight changes to, I'm assuming, just the exhibits. I mean, I don't think anyone's contemplating wholesale changes.
We will be given feedback after the fact on those.
Oh, sure. But, and I think everyone's talked about it. The Soul America needs to go with the application saying they have the placeholding position in the city of Petoskey. They can't go forward without that. So how do, you know, we struggled with that. It wasn't just an easy thing. And we came up with the idea, well, fine, don't make the easement effective until those conditions have been satisfied. So,
So Jim, though, aren't we also saying tonight by the resolution that if all the conditions precedent are met, we're authorizing the other agreements to move forward without further action from the council?
I'd have to look at the resolution. Tonight's, that's a good question.
That's the intent.
Yeah, I thought so.
That is the intent.
Yeah.
Because the application is gonna be submitted with all the work that's gone into the PPA, the interconnect, and the easement agreement. I don't think we want to turn around and come back, but we've met the conditions or contingencies in the easement agreement that will dictate whether or not we proceed or not with the PPA or interconnect.
Right. And then the other question, Jim, I had for you is, did you just review the easement or have you reviewed all of
I
them?
reviewed all of it. I relied heavily, maybe mostly on MPPA for the PPA agreement. And the interconnection, Michael McGeehan, sorry to put you on the spot, but really, if you read the interconnection agreement, it's technical. It's not legal. It's everything Michael described, and not being an engineer, I rely on Michael. But yes, I did make some suggested changes and they were accepted by both MPPA's council and Sol America. So I was able to, but when you say, Tina, that they are integrated or cross defaulted, it's not exactly that. That's why I like the reference, they speak together. I'm not going to talk about PURPA because this is complicated, but I will tell you, they speak together and I'm comfortable with the terms of the agreements. I participated heavily in the easement, and again, no documents perfect. There is the indemnity, there is insurance. So I think we have done our best and I'm comfortable with its form.
Well, that was just, you anticipated my question. And my question to you is just, I want to know if you'd reviewed all three.
Yep.
And in particular, since once again, we're not contracting with Sol America, we're contracting with an LLC again. So my question was specifically, and you just answered it, but to be clear, I want to make sure you're satisfied with the indemnification provision, the insurance provision, the development security, the performance security, and also the form of the guarantee that they provided at, I think, Exhibit E. I just want to make sure you recommend that we move forward.
I do on their form.
Okay.
I think, Steve, the very first slide, you know, it really goes back to, you have two choices, do the deal or don't do the deal, isn't it? I mean, in layman's terms. And there are certain industry standards, you know, I did question, for example, why can't we just do the deal with Sol America? Well, they don't do it. They form subsidiaries. That's common in the industry around the country, never been done otherwise. So when I say it's not perfect, those are the examples. I mean, obviously, I'd love a bigger company. The name they use, and I did look them up. They've already been formed, so it's not on the IFCOM, but it is Petoskey Affordable Solar, and they're a wholly owned subsidiary of Sol America.
Right.
So I think we have done the best we can do under these circumstances, given the relationship between three documents or, you know, three agreements to protect the city.
Thank you.
Yep.
Awesome. Do you have any other questions? We're down to the last slide, and this can be quick. To summarize, we do believe MPPA that this program that leads to this project provides the city a unique and strategic opportunity to pursue local renewable energy. As Michael covered, the engineering study and analysis results were favorable with no identified fatal flaws or deep concerns. The critical agreements have been commercially and legally negotiated and reviewed. And MPPA's recommendation to the city is to take the appropriate action steps in order for Sol America to submit an application on your behalf no later than December 15th. Thank you.
Council, Ms. Walker.
Mayor, I'd be happy to make a motion that the city council, that we authorize tonight the city manager to enter in agreements associated with the installation of solar on the city's landfill property.
Mr. Shields.
I second the motion.
Motion from Ms. Walker, and a second from Mr. Shields. Any other discussion? Mr. Shields.
I just want to make a quick comment and say, wow, awesome. Thank you to everybody involved. Well done. And I also want to thank the city residents for advocating for this. And it is the voice of the people that gets part of the credit for this coming together as well. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. I know it's the last time we visited this a couple of years ago, it was the cost of 15%, 20% more in the cost of energy that citizens would realize on their bill. And this, I think, takes that away and makes it very, very doable for the city and for the residents. So again, thank you. I thank the staff especially, and I know Shane has been very busy with it, Mike, Jim, and as well as you guys. I don't know, John, you're involved. No. You gotta take credit. No, but thank you very much from the city. We're moving forward. We had a dream of utilizing this several years ago. It didn't go to fruition, but here we are at it again. So thank you. Mr. Wagner.
Mayor, quick comment, really just echoing all of that. I just made a note here. I've had some discussion during the week with Shane about this, and I know how much you all did. And all I could think of, and as part of the master plan, it's consistent with the action plan. And sometimes, even though environment is important, we couldn't afford it before. It didn't make sense for the taxpayers. Thank you for MPPA's awareness of this project, because that comes up a lot. Like if there weren't folks in other parts of the state and other advocates for Little Petoskey, this wouldn't happen. So the timing of that, your knowledge of it, which I give Mike credit for and Shane credit for, that means a lot. And all I could think of as you all were talking and I was going through that, I know this isn't my job as council to do what you all do, but I thought, man, if I needed serious surgery, this is the group I'd want to perform that surgery. So thank you.
Walker. Aye. Shields.
Yes.
Moore. Aye.
Thank you, guys. I know one of you is driving back tonight, yeah. Moving along, what I want to bring up to you. So assessing services for 3-year period. We're going to table this matter for the next month. Due to just some minor issues on contract, nothing, I don't believe is very major at all.
Do you need a motion, Mayor?
I need a motion to table that motion, Ms. Walker.
Mayor, I'll be happy to table the motion and the adoption of a proposed resolution that would reaffirm the appointment of Alan Bergenberg Assessing and Consultants until we have more information for our next month's meeting.
I'll second the motion.
Mr. Shields, I have a motion from Ms. Walker, a second from Mr. Shields. Go to Ms. Beck for roll.
Walker. Aye. Shields.
Yes.
Moore. Aye. Wagner.
Yes.
Murphy.
Yes, motion passes 5-0. Next, the adoption of a proposed resolution approving the 2024 poverty exemption policy and guidelines. I turn it over to City Manager Horn.
Thank you, Mayor. I was going to have our assessor here for this, but I think this is fairly routine. We do it on an annual basis. The General Property Tax Act allows for property tax exemptions for persons who meet the requirements within the act from a household income standpoint, and poverty guidelines that are within the resolutions, and these are obviously adjusted annually. So the resolution that's before you has the adjusted guidelines within the general Property Tax Act. So I think this is, you've seen this before. This is not necessarily new. We do it annually. So if you're comfortable proceeding without the assessor here, we can certainly do that.
Mr. Moore.
So this is just a question. I'm not advocating for this. It's just for my understanding. I see that the statute allows for like 25% and 50% reductions too. Does anybody know if we've ever done that or why we don't or what the thinking is? And if not, I can ask the assessor.
I don't know that. And
How many do we have accessing it at this point? Do you have any idea?
I don't,
Okay. We'll get that in 2 weeks,
last year.
Yeah, in the past, it's been like
Less than
6%,
10.
definitely
Yeah.
less than 10.
a handful.
Mhm.
Then we will get final numbers on that in 2 weeks.
It actually may go into, depending on the availability of Mr. Berg. He may have a conflict on the 18th, so we may have to go into
Okay.
January, but.
Miss. Demore.
You ready for a motion?
Yeah.
So moved.
A motion from Miss Demore and a second from Miss Walker. Any other discussion or comments from council? From the public, do you wish to express anything on this? There being none, I go to City Clerk Beck for roll.
Demore,
Aye.
Walker,
I,
Shields.
Yes.
Wagner.
Yes.
Murphy.
Yes, motion passes. Next is the first reading of proposed ordinance to amend the city of Petoskey zoning map concerning the rezoning of a vacant parcel from R3 to RM2 on the Petoskey street near East Sheridan Street. I'll go back to city mayor. I'm gonna go right to our city planner, John.
Honorable Mayor, members of the City Council, Calchick Developing LLC has requested a zoning map change from R3 to RM2 for the purpose of developing a small apartment on his 0.41 acre site, which is on Petoskey towards the dead end of Petoskey Street. Mr. Calchick also owns a piece of property immediately to the west that has an address on Sheridan, which is parcel 400-100. And there he has already a pre-existing apartment complex with off-street parking. His property, the one that's being proposed for rezoning, is on the dividing line between the RM2 district and the R3 district. And he's asking to change the zoning to allow him to put in a small apartment unit. The planning commission went through their deliberations. They took a look at the master plan. The master plan has this area designated as mixed residential 2, which is defined as a neighborhood that would have a mixture of single family, 2-family, and small apartment complexes. The neighborhood does have that. On Sheridan, there are 3 apartments that are adjacent and across the street from each other. They fit in contextually with the neighborhood. So they look like a large home, but there are apartments. The planning commission felt it was consistent with the objectives of the master plan for the mixed neighborhood. Also, the action plan, which is calling for additional housing within the community. Their recommendation to the city commission, city council was to, their recommendation was to proceed with the zoning map change. Do you have any questions?
I do.
Yes.
Your professional opinion on this, I take it, you're highly esteemed in the area of zoning. How do you feel this is a good move for the city of Petoskey?
I think it's a very good move. There's not many lots of this size in that neighborhood. We took a look at it, discussed it at the PC. We feel that they probably could accommodate a triplex along with off-street parking. So we're not talking a large apartment complex. It'll be somewhere between a triplex or a quadplex that could be accommodated on the property.
when you develop a piece of property like this, the capacity of the property is dictated by the size of the building and the required off-street parking. So there's a balance between the two that's really gonna limit how many units can go on the property.
Is there anything that you would recommend different than what is proposed here?
No, and I think what the planning commission's looking for is that if this is rezoned, the Caltrek LLC, they come in with a site plan, there's an opportunity actually to integrate both of their properties and have a shared parking facility.
Okay,
So they're looking at a bigger picture if this does get approved by the city council.
okay. Mr. Moore,
Well, the only constituent question I got was what was small, so you just answered that, either 3 or 4 units. But then I just went to look at it myself because I wanted to understand. So is the piece of property that would be developed like where that driveway is,
Yes.
to the left or the right?
The driveway is to the north. The property is to the south, but he has an easement
Okay,
on the property to go back into the site.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
questions? Comments? Ms. Walker?
So Kelchick, developing, they are really well-known and excellent landlords. They maintain their buildings. I've had, personal familial experience with people that have rented from them. They manage a multifamily unit, down on Emmett Street, which was not identified on the map. And they are very credible and honest and transparent people. So I would have no problems with, approving the proposed development. I do have a question about the impetus for when we start to change our zones altogether, because it seems to me like this R3 zone, this single family residential zone, which feels like they don't want to allow anything other than single family units. I'm wondering at what point the city just revises all of our residential zoning if we go from R1, R2, R3, and there might be other zones to just one residential zoning. And if that could be, when does that conversation happen and how could that be an impetus for that conversation to happen?
I believe that the planning commission is moving. One of the directives that we gave them was to start looking at the zoning, bridging those combining zones. And that was my understanding that's.
You're correct, Mayor. The planning commission actually has a zoning committee that will be meeting soon. And one of the initial objectives of the committee is to take a look at zoning district consolidation.
And can you confirm, thank you, Mayor. Can you confirm with me that there are just 3 residential differentiating zones, or are there more than 3?
You have 3 Rs.
Yes.
Your RM1, your RM2. So you have. And then in some of your B districts, they allow residential, so you probably have 6 to 7 zoning districts that allow some form of residential development.
But the 3 that are primary with that R in the front would be residential, and there's only 3.
Correct.
Mr. Shields.
Making a just quick comment to say that this type of small family apartment is the missing middle type of housing that is important to increase in capacity for our city for the housing needs. Thank you.
Do I have a motion?
There is none.
Oh, I'm sorry, first reading. Any other comments, council? Without being a motion, we will go to the next one. Adoption proposed resolution approving the 2024 city council meeting schedule. City Manager Horn.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. So we do this on an annual basis, looking ahead to the next calendar year. We certainly don't want to be presumptuous in what we have in the resolution. We've kind of selected dates that were consistent with what we've done in the past, but we will open the floor up for discussion and potential amendments to what's in front of you, but we wanted to get something in front of you to at least start the discussion.
I think this is the same as it was normally, isn't it? Following pretty much the same of April, first meeting of April is canceled due to spring break. Labor Day, that first meeting in September was canceled. I think that actually falls on the day before Labor Day. I believe those are the 2 dates that have changed. Mr. Moore.
Oh, I'm sorry.
There's a Thursday. I don't understand.
Sorry, we did try to incorporate for the general election in November. That is going to be, and we talked about this last November, and we're just kind of late getting it incorporated, but for the sake of our staff, potentially moving that first meeting in November forward later in that week, just to provide that breather, if you will, because it's going to be a long, heavy day.
Mr. Moore.
And I'm sorry.
So, and also in addition, the August primary, so those dates are actually, I believe, proposed to be the second and fourth Monday.
Oh, I see.
Yes,
Okay.
second and fourth
That was my question. Are those already in there then?
in the resolution. Yes.
Already accommodated? for
August and
this?
November, yes.
Wasn't there the potential for another election too? And
There is, if
Okay.
potentially in May, that won't be determined until at least 60 days before, so we left them the first and third Mondays. Not knowing. And then the presidential primary in February does not affect our meeting dates. So February is normal.
Council, are you okay with this?
Yes.
Mr. Wagner.
Two comments. One is that I was looking up dates. The midwinter break that I know doesn't affect me goes to February 16th to 19th. I don't know if that's like a school vacation thing, like spring break. That was one question, and what's the other one? I think I've got a potential conflict on that, believe it or not, November 7th, but it's so far out I can move it.
You need a motion to
I
approve.
do need a
Okay,
motion.
I'm happy to make a motion to approve. The adopted resolution for our 2024 city council meeting schedule.
Second.
support.
I have a motion from Ms. Walker and a second from Ms. Demore. Any other discussion, council, at this point? Public wish to weigh in on this motion? There being none, I go to city clerk Beck for roll.
Walker.
Yes.
Demore.
Aye.
Shields.
Yes.
Wagner.
Yes.
Murphy.
Yes. Now we're to old business. We have 6 items. The first is the second reading and possible adoption of proposed ordinance. Creating a licensing and regulatory framework for short-term rentals. I'm gonna turn it over to City Manager Horn to start with.
Thank you, Mayor. So this continues our discussion on short-term rentals. We've had good feedback from city council, the public, from our city planner and our city attorney. Rhonda Stowers is joining us remotely as well. So I just want to open up the floor and continue our discussion we'll start with the licensing ordinance and then move on to the zoning.
Okay. Wagner.
Thank you. On this one, I believe I'm comfortable with the changes throughout. For one, I'm become less comfortable with over time is the cap. Not that we shouldn't have a cap, but I believe in the residential area, we already have one by virtue of the grandfathered properties. And if then looking at just the 13 licenses for in the commercial zones, we're only adding 7. And I can think of 3 or 4 properties, including the mid-in that we've talked about, that 7 can go away very quickly. And there's actually a benefit from a sort of limiting hotels. We're limited in hotels, prices are high as could be. And so I believe there should be some limit, but I'm not sure what it should be. 7 more units doesn't sound like very much. So I propose 45 or something just to give us.
Is it possible that we can revisit this after accepting the 40 and revisiting it, or?
There's no cap in here.
It says cap.
Yeah, that's part, but we haven't, it's not included.
So I'm also asking that this talking about a cap.
Yeah, that's something that needs to be discussed and find consensus on. I mean, we will do that via, I guess, I'll defer to John, but I would think if we kind of find some consensus, we would bring back a resolution setting that formally.
That's correct. Yeah. The cap, your honor, members of council, the cap can be adjusted at any time by council based on approval of a resolution. So you can go up or down depending on your license demand at any time.
We do have right now, there's a room for 7 more, is that right, or?
If you went with 40, you currently have 33 licenses that are, you have 33 properties that are licensed. The planning commission had recommended 40. Out of the 33, 20 are grandfathered in. 19 are in residential districts, 1 is in an industrial district. So you would only have, if you accepted the planning commission's cap, you would only, you would have 7 licenses available at this point.
And those would be in which district?
Those would be throughout the city. Or the 7 would only be available in the business districts.
Right.
The ones that are grandfathered in the residential districts would remain until at such time the property is transferred, and then the license would be, it would expire.
And the need for first floor residential would be addressed, or the prohibition of that would be addressed through other zoning?
No, it's gonna be addressed in the next ordinance.
Okay.
The prohibition of STRs or short-term rentals on the first floor.
Okay.
In the business district. Yes.
And because the other ones are grandfathered in, there will not be more short-term rentals in the residential area.
That's correct.
Okay. Should a residential grandfathered in be not applied for, or the house sold or whatever, there's no transfer.
That's correct.
And that would that be offered to the residential, or would it go back to
It would go into the pool
for commercial business?
Commercial business, yeah.
Yes. I want to make that clear because I did have questions, calls on that from people. What happens to the grandfather if it's closed down or stopped? Are we going to the residential? And we are not.
No.
We are going to stay with the commercial and general business. Okay. Mr. Shields.
Thank you, Mayor. Just, it looks like we're getting consensus on the inform the staff on the cap, and I am also okay with increasing the cap from the 40. Well, that's 45. I was going to suggest 50, but so I'm okay with increasing it more. I think there's been some valid points raised to increase it a little bit.
Do you feel that those 7 or 6 or 7 are going to be taken up and utilized?
Yes.
In a short term?
Yeah, very short term.
Okay.
Probably as soon as the moratorium is lifted.
I'm good with 45.
But as I had mentioned, that the cap is established by separate resolution.
Right.
Which would probably come at your next meeting.
Right, but
you still have time amongst yourself to talk about what you think the cap is. All I wanted to say is the recommendation of the planning commission was 40.
And was there a reason why it was 40?
They wanted to keep it as low as possible. That was about 2% of the housing stock. They don't want to, the issue that the planning commission has is a very important one. The master plan and the housing study that was just commissioned by the city. There's a need for both owner and rental housing, full-time, year-round, both market and affordable. And short-term rentals basically competes with that housing stock. So the planning commission's approach was, let's try to limit the STRs as much as possible in order to protect the housing stock that we currently have. That's their strategy.
No, those are not going to the residential anyway.
Correct.
Miss Walker.
Thanks, Mayor. There is a little bit of confusion based on the zoning restrictions that in the B2, which would be the central business district, that first floor has to be retail. And that's what the restriction, that's what that restriction exists. And then by default, the B3 or other properties that would be zoned under the business would automatically follow that rule.
Yeah.
So just looking at the short-term licenses that we have, both 315 and 315.5 Grove Street, while in the B2B district, is a house. And it's a duplex, and so the first and second floors are for residential dwelling. In this context, they're Airbnbs. Wakazoo, 414 Wakazoo Avenue, also directly located in the central business district, is a house that's been converted to a commercial property for Airbnbs. So where do those units, both in the B2 districts, are they given a waiver because of the style of the architecture? Those are actual houses that have been converted to commercial uses. So where does the law apply there?
If I may.
Please.
Councilperson, the ones on Grove would be non-conforming, just like any other non-conforming use. The units on Wakazoo, which are 4, which are in the downtown, which are in the central business district. Under the definition proposed in the ordinance for motel and hotel, because right now we only have a definition for hotel. We are going, if you approve it, you will have a definition for motel. Before, short-term rentals that are on Wakazoo would be converted by definition into a motel because they have exterior entrances, and those 4 licenses would go into the pool.
And if I may, Mayor.
Please.
So what happens with a non-conforming property in this process?
Well, until such time it's sold. Okay, if the duplex is sold, then the licenses, at least the one on the first floors would not be able to be reoccupied as short-term rentals. But as long as the ownership of the property remains, or in this case, because it's non-conforming under state statute, if the property is sold within a reasonable time and technically not vacated or abandoned, the non-conformity can exist and continue.
Thank you. I have another question that builds on that, Mayor, if I may.
Please.
So assuming all of these people, these 23, both grandfathered and business district licensed Airbnbs, will everybody have to reapply just as standard process every year?
Yes.
For their application?
Yes.
Nobody's grandfathered and given a license in perpetuum
They have to reapply for their license every year,
every year. Thank you.
just like everyone else.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Other questions, council? Mr. Moore.
Well, are we still talking about licensing? Because we've kind of morphed the zoning, so I don't know if I should.
I think we should stay on licensing.
Should stay on license. There being any other questions? Do I have a possible motion to open up discussion?
Council,
Yes,
before there's a motion, I did have one issue in reviewing this ordinance for the second reading in terms of the definition of occupant, which is on line 90. It's an individual staying in a short-term rental other than a guest. That may still have a lot of interpretation to it, whether someone says, well, I'm just a guest, I'm not staying. Do we want to just indicate any individual staying overnight in a short-term rental period?
you good with that, council? For a change?
Yes.
In addition? Sure. City attorney, you're good with that? Anything else, Ms. Stoller?
No, I don't believe so as to this ordinance. I know we did have some discussion. Oh dear.
Going back.
And Councilman or Councilperson Demore, did you have an additional change? Was it in this one or the zoning ordinance?
It's in the zoning ordinance, Rhonda.
Yeah,
Okay.
It's in the zoning, but I do have one just question or confirmation when it's my turn.
Go ahead.
Am I correct, Ms. Stowers, in understanding that I'm still concerned about the lack of a minimum standard for liability limits here? Am I correct in understanding you're fine the way it is?
It was my understanding, based on the discussion at the last meeting, that while there may be an appropriate minimum limit, that was going to be determined and set as part of the application process. That it was going to be set forth in the application rather than in the ordinance itself. That way it can be adjusted if we determine it needs to be higher, it needs to be lower. This just requires insurance of some kind, and then we can hone in on that when we're doing the application.
You are right, and you have refreshed my recollection. Thank you.
Any other questions, council?
Rhonda, just for our record keeping purposes, so the definition that you're proposing for occupant is any individual staying in a short-term rental or staying overnight in a short?
Staying overnight.
Staying overnight in a short-term rental.
Okay, thank you.
Does anybody have a motion so we can take this to the floor, et cetera?
So moved, including the change just made to the definition of occupant.
I have a motion from Ms. Demore, support. I have a second from Mr. Wagner. Council, do you wish to have any other discussion? I now make this available to the public to address council. When you come up or online, need your full name and full address. Does anyone wish to address council at this time? Please. There is some time limit, so just to let you know.
That is my comment is pre-prepared. I'm Mallory.
Just the appointment of Barb.
Oh, there we go. Okay, gotta be on the left-hand side. I'm Mallory Powell, myself and my husband John, own the commercial property zoned B3 located at 215 West Mitchell Street. As Brian, Councilman Wagner, previously mentioned, we are in development for the Mid-Inn, so again, I appreciate the opportunity to offer my data-driven insights and over a decade of hospitality expertise on this important and nuanced topic. Transparently, I would guess that as they have in past meetings, some of my prepared comments may run longer than the time limit being proposed, but I will do my absolute best to speak as quickly as possible. I do not want to by any means monopolize meeting time. I want to reiterate the importance of not only having the appropriate audience with our elected officials during discussion time that has been earmarked for this purpose, but also making sure that our comments are heard and documented on the public record, especially as we have repeatedly tried to seek clarity and solutions outside of meeting time with no success. Again, a bit of background. We purchased our property zoned B3, a then ground level commercial office space with a 2-bed, 1-bath condo on the second level in May of 2022. We had moved here as full-time residents from Chicago in the summer of 2021 and had waited until the right property arose. Our purchase was contingent on the ability to convert the lower level to additional sleeping quarters and operate the full building as a short-term rental. We confirmed this directly with the city ahead of the purchase, especially as our project would require a substantial investment of time and resources, and we were given a green light. No qualifications, stipulations, or any mention that there was a risk that the laws might change prior to our planned opening date. When we filed our business license in March of 2022, our license fee was cash, though our business license was withheld without reason and with no notification. For clarity's sake, I want to note on the record that we made an entirely income-based investment and made our intentions known to the city at these multiple touch points that I just noted. Without a clear go-ahead from the city, and if there had been any mention of any proposed changes that might prohibit us, we would not have moved forward with the property purchase or any of the subsequent and very costly related investments for our project. To be clear, we agree wholeheartedly with the 2014 ordinance, and we believe it was forward-thinking and fundamental in protecting our neighborhoods and long-term housing supply. We are in full support of continuing those regulations established in 2014, as well as any productive additions that may allow the city to establish a higher standard and clearer processes, as well as a system for rectifying issues and establishing penalties for problematic properties. That said, there is an abundant amount of data which illustrates that we have likely already reached the limits of where the regulation alone, particularly to the zoning, actually serves to add additional protection to our neighborhoods and communities. In fact, if we consider our current predicament, mine and John, anecdotally, it might be argued that the proposed additions to the ordinance and zoning constitute such overregulation that they infringe upon our right of use as owners of a property in a business district. And furthermore, my right to work as someone who is solely self-employed by the business we're developing. Empirically speaking, STRs have experienced an astronomical growth in the last decade, yet we have not seen this in Petoskey. In 2014, the year in which the original ordinance was adopted, Airbnb had roughly 800,000 users worldwide. Presently, Airbnb has over 150 million users worldwide and has booked over 1 billion stays. This is an over 18,650% increase. And this is only one website in a booming market that has concurrently seen massive growth of multiple similar businesses like VRBO, for example, that have also had their own substantial following and unique usership. Conversely, during the same period of time in Petoskey, only 8 properties, 13 licensed, but 8 properties, all commercial, have sought and obtained STR licenses. As opposed to the nearly 19,000% increase we've seen across Airbnb, we've seen only a 40% increase over nearly a decade, starting with a base of 20 grandfathered residential properties that already existed prior to the ordinance. This is much to the credit of the 2014 ordinance, which showed incredible foresight in protecting our community, our housing, and our residential neighborhoods. This begs the question, why is Petoskey making such a priority of this issue? And further, such an investment of time and resources, further narrowing this already highly restricted ordinance. Furthermore, even if updates to the ordinance and zoning remained a priority, why have we established a moratorium on new licenses in a market of 8 legitimate commercial properties? It seems clear that the important framework established by the ordinance is already sufficiently narrow and quite restrictive in terms of its zoning. In a practical sense, the proposed additions would make it impossible for John and I, proven hospitality business owners with a wealth of industry experience, to move forward as an STR, though it was confirmed as a condition prior to our purchase and is the most appropriate classification for our concept. I would be remiss to say that it is immensely frustrating and discouraging, especially in the midst of a lodging shortage in our primarily tourism-based economy. I would hope that business owners like us would not only be welcomed, but would be shepherded through the process. This is all to say that it seems that there may be a more dynamic and comprehensive solution available to us. Instead of focusing so heavily on additional regulatory language, Petoskey would benefit from a slight shift in mindset and focus on this topic. I would argue that the original ordinance already got us 90% of the way there. We have a real opportunity to instead focus attention on building best practices, processes, and a framework to prevent and weed out problematic rentals and renters, while also carving out space for professionally operated short-term rentals in Petoskey. Unregulated STRs, as you guys have said, without question are a threat to Petoskey. Residential STRs seem particularly problematic, both due to their location and what is easy to presume may be a less professional standard. But this does not mean that STRs are categorically bad or that they have no place in Petoskey, especially in the midst of an equally present lodging shortage. STRs are at their core small businesses, and it would only be beneficial to our lodging shortage and our economy to carve out space for those that operate as such, especially if they are strictly in commercial areas with a high bar set for standards of operation. There is a clear gap in our lodging market, which, especially in light of the severe lack of lodging options, and again, our tourism-based economy, we should be eager to fill. I'm hopeful that once we are given the opportunity, and if given the opportunity, our business model might illustrate what STRs can be at their best and inspire the planning commission and council to broaden their mindset about what constitutes an STR. We represent something that doesn't exist here, and something that for years as tourists, we desperately tried to find here and often traveled elsewhere in favor of. In closing, might we consider then that the problems caused by STR in Petoskey would be better solved by shifting the focus of the revised ordinance less towards narrowing who can and can't be a rental and more towards setting a clearer process and a higher standard of excellence for those who can? Okay, I'm at the very, very end. By setting that standard and a clear set of penalties for those who don't adhere, I'm hoping we can attract the right commercial businesses into the future and simultaneously rectify problems with some of the more problematic properties. I would presume primarily grandfathered, either because they have the resources and infrastructure to adhere to a higher standard, or because they lose their license due to non-compliance. Additionally, and especially with the looming threat of a potential state legislation, might incentivizing longer-term and workforce housing options be more effective in actually protecting against the worst-case scenario? In a world where up to 30% of available housing might be allowed to become short-term rentals, the additional regulation ceases to provide any additional protection. I would argue that this should be the primary goal of the updates, especially considering what is laid out in the intent section. Alternatively, setting a clear process and high standards for rentals will create better rentals in a scenario where we have less controls to restrict them. That, in tandem with incentivizing people away from becoming STRs, might actually stand a chance in protecting our housing supply to at least a degree. Thank you.
Anyone else wish to speak to council at this time? Anybody online? No. Go back to. Yeah, Ms. Patton. Yes, Ms. Patton.
May I speak?
Please.
This is Allison Patton, resident of 602 East Lake in the city. I just would like to respond briefly to the previous speaker. I want to first say I have no personal vested interest. I don't have any short-term rentals near me. I do think that the proposed ordinance strikes the correct balance, and that it is council's duty to protect the interest of the residents of the city. We are your electorate, and it is not the duty of the city council to represent the interest of investors, no matter what they believed when they bought their properties. Investors who purchased in a residential area thinking that they were going to be able to do short-term rentals, I'm sorry, but you made an assumption that was not an assumption you should have made. So I would urge council to vote to pass the proposed ordinance. Thank you.
Anyone else wish to speak to council at this time? Yeah, right. In the audience, anybody? For being to city clerk back for roll.
Demore. Aye. Wagner.
Yes.
Shields.
Yes.
Walker. Yes. Murphy.
Yes, motion passes 5-0. Next is the adoption of the proposed resolution to confirm the proposed special assessment role. Oh, I'm sorry. Second reading, possible adoption of a proposed ordinance amending Appendix A of the zoning ordinance in regards to short-term rentals, and I turned it over to city planner.
Honorable Mayor, members of the City Commission, the next ordinance before you is the zoning ordinance
Right.
portion of the short-term rental program. The first one that you just approved was the licensing provisions. This ordinance is designating what districts the short-term rentals can be allowed in. And also it includes several definitions, bedroom, dwelling unit, motel, and short-term rental, which those definitions are not currently found in the zoning code, and they need to be there. And then it also has a, because short-term rentals are going to be allowed as a, within the business district, there are standards for short-term rentals. So we're going to be adding a new section to the code, which is 1719, standards for short-term rentals. And we have 3 standards that have to be met. And the first standard is that in the zoning districts, those are the business districts, the short-term rentals shall be located above the first floor of the principal building. And I believe Councilperson Demore has some amended language that has been reviewed by the city manager, myself, and by Rhonda, the city attorney, that we both, all 3 of us are in agreement with. And I would like Council Demore to go over that suggested amendment.
Please.
So this just actually kind of follows up, part with what Lindsay brought up. So if we're looking at section 1719, number 1, I got some input from constituents that this first phrase for those zoning districts where applicable was vague or unclear. And so working with the city planner and Ms. Stowers, the language would just be for those zoning districts where short-term rentals are a principal permitted use.
She's not,
I'm sorry, I'm on page 172 on the back, section 1719, number 1. Instead of that beginning phrase for those zoning districts where applicable, since it's unclear what we're referencing, it would read for those zoning districts where short-term rentals are a principal permitted use, which is what it references under 3 on the prior page. So when we reference short-term rentals are a principal permitted use, it's just a clarification.
You're good with that, Ms. Stowers?
Yes, I am.
Okay. Ms. Walker?
So I have a question about what that actually means for what you have here in front of you.
Could you explain that?
yes, Councilperson, what that means is that in the business districts that are listed, B1, B2, B2A, B2B, B3, B3A, and B3B, short-term rentals are allowed as a use, but they're only can be allowed on the floors above the ground floor. That's what Councilperson Demore's amendment is.
Is that what the planning commission?
And that's what the planning commission's recommend. The planning commission wanted to encourage short-term rentals in the business districts, but they did not want the short-term rentals competing with first floor space in the business districts for retail and office. The other concern that they had is in some of the business districts, we currently have vacant buildings. I think one that we're all familiar with is Rite Aid. Their idea was we certainly don't want the Rite Aid piece of property converted into short-term rentals. We have limited retail square footage outside of the downtown. And the planning commission wanted to make sure that the retail square footage was not going to be reduced over time through competitions with short-term rental on the ground floor. So they are not allowed on the ground floor or the first floor, but they are allowed above in the upper floors of the buildings.
Ms. Walker?
Thanks, Mayor. So to answer my question, 1013 Buckley Avenue is in B2B. That was the most recent permit issued. It used to be a single family house and a renter with people that actually live there that we know and love, and they got booted out and the building was sold and it was turned into an Airbnb. So my question is, what happens to these people if we're gonna put that? What's gonna happen to these licenses if you amend this ordinance? They now become non-conforming.
That's correct. You're gonna have a couple of instances where licenses were granted in business districts on the first floor.
Yep.
That are gonna be non-conforming.
Okay, so when said business entities go to apply for a renewal of their license, they'll be denied,
No, because they already have an existing license.
but they're non-conforming.
That doesn't matter. They're non-conforming in terms of land use, not in terms of a licensing application. Two different.
Hence the reason we always have to keep them separate when we're talking about.
That's what we
things.
do.
Okay. Great.
Any other, Mr. Shields, you had a question? Comment?
Yeah, still formulating the head, but so the first four use, I understood was the concerns were limiting retail space. I guess that's less of a concern to me personally, given that there's a cap. Is there also a concern that those are if you just mentioned one, long-term housing options? Is that also a potential concern if we allowed for first floor to be short-term rental? Is some of those could be long-term housing? Yeah. In the say the first floor, is it retail, but it's also could be long-term housing? Is that correct or no?
No. I mean, that's currently not allowed.
And any of the, I know there's not in B2, but same with B3?
Yes.
B2, B3 and central business district.
Now, I will say that some of these concepts that you're talking about, councilperson, may be discussed by the zoning committee. Because there's in the future, I mean, what's currently going on in planning and zoning is that communities are trying to incur mixed use within the various districts. Right. So there's not a segregation of land uses. The concern is that those be done appropriately, and that's what the planning zoning committee is going to be taking a look at in terms of how can we mix uses in the future without impairing one versus the other one. So it's going to be a kind of a critical balance, but it's a discussion that the planning commission wants to have.
Mr. Shields.
Thank you, Mayor, and thanks, John. I guess for where I'm sitting, I'm not strongly opposed to dropping that first floor. Because of the idea, the value of mixed use. I appreciate that. I think that's a great direction to go. And yes, we too, Ms. Patton's comments, we do represent the residents, but it's not as straightforward as just the residents' concerns about a particular issue. Is also thinking holistically about the economic health of our community. And I think Ms. Powell's comments are good. And I recognize those comments that it is we need to look holistically at the health of our business district. And thinking about the vacancies and a limited, well-regulated, capped short-term rental use. It's something that I don't fear. I think that we have a good system in place to regulate that, and that the first floor restriction is unnecessary.
You believe that in the commercial and the downtown? We're talking B1, B2, B3, and we're also talking with the central business district. Are you saying next to Shorter's, Katie decides that they're going to put housing on the first floor? You're okay with that?
Yeah, I want to have this discussion. So no, I'm not okay with that. So maybe it is a B3 versus a B2. Mm-hmm. Because it's a good point there. I wouldn't be okay with that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the kind of conversation I'm trying to have right now. That's exactly what you said. Is like, I understand in the central business district, why we don't allow residential first floor. It totally makes sense to me. I get it. But if that's gonna be extrapolated to all the rest of the business districts, that's where it doesn't make sense to me. So that's why I would like to have that conversation as well.
Well, let me add. When we talk about mixed use, there's two different types of mixed use projects. There's horizontal mixed use, where you have a commercial or office building, and then adjacent to it, you may have another building that's residential in a project. Example being the Maple Block project, where you have apartments, and then you have a reserve outlot that's going to be for commercial. That's a horizontal mixed use project. Typically in a business district.
Excuse me, let him finish.
Typically in a business district, you have vertical mixed use where the first floor and the second floor can be retail or office, and residential's on the upper levels. Where the planning commission is going, and from a planning perspective, you do not want to open up your first floor spaces on your commercial districts to residential units. Because the city is constrained geographically. You do not have any more areas available for retail development or retail business. And the planning commission's concern is if the first floor is made available for residential and then becomes short-term rental, the short-term rental market is going to basically compete with your retail market and your retail businesses. And we're slowly going to use the retail, except for the retail that's currently in the downtown. The planning commission did not want to go there because we currently have some vacant buildings in the business district that they do not want converted into first floor residential.
Why don't, if you want to speak, raise your hand and you can tell everybody, otherwise, let's not whisper. Mr. Wagner.
So I'm curious about, and John and I live in the same condo complex. Up the hill, I don't know, to Jefferson, but on Mitchell, where somebody built a giant house that's just being used for short-term rentals, upstairs, downstairs, and now they're building 2 more condos on the property. Where are those classified?
They are not. In fact, the city has issued citations to them to cease because they are not licensed as a short-term rental, even though they're advertising as one.
Okay, I was told by the city at one point that if they were approved because they're on a business in a business district.
No.
Anyone else? Ms. Demore.
So just to come full circle, what I'm proposing isn't different than what was there last time. It's just to try to make it more clear to people that read it. Just so we're clear.
Mr. Shields.
Thanks, Mr. Moore, because it was unclear, and I think it's more clear with how your suggestion. Because I wrote a note, you know, if I can find it. How it was written there at the section 1719 is this applying to the B2 or B3? So it wasn't clear. So I appreciate the clarity and still wonder if there is value in making that distinction between the B2 versus the B3. The planning commission, those vacant buildings, were those in the B2 that there were specific vacancies they were concerned about?
Commercial district.
They're in the commercial districts and they're outside of the CBD.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else, council? Does public wish to speak on, wait, we have to have a motion first in order to get it to that point. Does anybody have a motion for this?
I moved, that the short-term rental ordinance be instituted with the proposed amendment of the language at section 1719(1).
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
I have a motion from Ms. Demore and a second from Mr. Wagner. Any other discussion, council? I open it to the public to make comment to council. Full name, full address, And we are gonna keep track on time because we've been here 2.5 hours now, so come up full name, full address.
Mallory Powell, 215 West Mitchell Street, Commercial District Zone B3. The property that we purchased in May of 2022 was an existing condo on the upper floor and a lower level commercial space. Research in the past has led me to believe that it has at times been residences, but it was not when we purchased it. The question I have kind of goes both towards Councilman Shields and Councilwoman Walker's questions and comments with regard to the first floor. Specifically, I think as we were trying to get at what would happen with the non-conforming properties, and you asserted that those would be those that already had a license. I want to reiterate that we did not make an assumption when we purchased their property. We actually asked if it could be converted to a residential use, and that was a contingency of our purchase. We were given carte blanche approval for that and told we were zoned appropriately. I have that in writing. So where would we fall in terms of a non-conforming property? Because again, it almost feels like we're being backed into a corner where our only outlet would be legal. And there is a precedent to support our claims. Thank you.
Anyone else wish to speak to council at this time? Anything online? I go to Ms. Beck for roll.
Demore,
Aye.
Wagner,
Yes.
Shields,
No.
Walker, no.
Murphy.
Yes. Motion passes 3-2. Next, the adoption of a proposed resolution that would confirm the proposed special assessment role. I go to City Manager Horn for that.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. In your packet is a special assessment role based upon DMB's recommended assessment formula as outlined in the memo. This proposed resolution would confirm City Council's approval of the proposed role and direct staff to certify the role and spread the assessments accordingly and invoice property owners within the next 30 days.
Council, we've reviewed this, I think, once or twice now, with discussion. Do you have anything you wish to add, talk about, clarification from city manager or from Becky Goodman, downtown management director? Otherwise, I asked for a possible motion. Mr. Moore.
I just want to mention on the record that the only constituent input I received was whether there is any mechanism in this context or otherwise to address downtown vacancies, which I know we've all sought before, but I just want to put it back on the record that someone was asking.
Okay. Mr. Shields.
Thank you, Mayor. With the letter you read at the outset, I have not heard negative comments until that letter. Is that council's or general experience as well?
I think they would have spoke up if they did.
Yeah, okay.
They received one text opposed, but it was after the Petoskey News Review referred to this as a tax, the 5% tax, and that started the spread. And so not that I don't take that seriously, but it was a downtown business owner opposed to any increase during a difficult economy. But again, it was one, and we represent them all. And I look at the downtown management board as I forget how many are on the board, but business owners downtown who would put this forward to us. And
the request was not about, the letter was not about increase as much as it was about generally any tax, any assessment at all, is what it was about. Do I have a motion or not motion?
So moved.
Mr. Shields motions. Do I have a second? I'll second. Mr. Wagner. Any other discussion? Does public wish to weigh in on this to council at this time? There being none, I take it to Sarah Beck, clerk for roll.
Shields.
Yes.
Wagner.
Yes.
Demore.
Aye.
Walker.
Yes.
Murphy.
Yes. Next is the adoption of proposed resolution approving 2024 schedule of fees and charges, and I turn this over to city manager
Thank you, Mayor. Based on City Council's feedback a few meetings back, we have went back and looked at some of the fees and charges that were brought up at the last meeting, particularly mobile food vending, dining decks. We do propose a short-term rental license fee as well in this that would increase and then have some comparable municipal comparisons, as well as a zoning board of appeals, special meetings, and ADUs. Again, based on feedback from the last meeting, we've tried to address some of those and adjusted fees based on some feedback.
Council, are you have questions, comments, concerns with this? Ms. Walker.
Thank you, Mayor. I did have one question. So under the rates and changes, proposed changes for 2024, the office of the city planner had like the biggest jump of like over 100%. And can you tell me who would call a special meeting as requested by the applicant of the planning commission?
Yes, I can. The applicant has the ability to call for a special meeting, and that would be the fee.
So I guess my question was, who would call a special meeting? What kind of applicant? Like a developer are you talking about?
Well, for example, we had the planning commission had a special meeting at the request of the developer on the Maple Block site plan review. They wanted it accelerated because of their pending deadline with MSHDA.
Got it. So somebody like a developer of that scale of like a $50 million project would be okay with a $1,000 fee as opposed to 150, which was the fee in previous years.
That's correct.
Okay.
Otherwise, they would wait till the regular scheduled meeting and there would there wouldn't be that fee at all. This is to expedite instead of the regular planning.
Sure. No, I understand that. I just wondered like who and like what would the context be for that? And there's also a similar, if I may, Mayor, there's also a similar fee for if somebody wants to, an applicant wants to request a zoning board of appeals review, correct?
Yes.
Okay. But oftentimes, like the zoning board of appeals doesn't even hold meetings, like their meetings are canceled, and that's because there's a lack of agenda items, whereas like the planning commission would never have their meeting canceled because there's never a shortage of agenda items. So I guess I'm just wondering, like, do you do that? Do you have a high cost to do something to disincentivize somebody, or is it because they have a lot of money and they're a developer, so you're just assuming that they're going to be able to pay the price to hold a special meeting of, well, there's a city staff there, but they're mostly like a volunteer body of people.
And I think we're trying to get applicants to, they know the schedule. And so working within the schedule that's posted, that's what we're trying to steer people toward. This is a planning commission, ZBA, our volunteers. We want to be respectful for their time. They know the schedule, just like you just approved your schedule for 24. They know what their routine is. And now we're asking them to switch it up and come in on a different day, which is an inconvenience. So we don't want to make it easy for someone to request a special meeting because it shouldn't happen.
Okay, that makes sense to me. Thank you.
Mr. Moore.
I was just gonna say as a postscript too, my understanding of this is we're sort of trying to get to these fees to a level that represents kind of the time involved.
Yes.
Yes.
So a question on the earlier iteration, there was a fee for vacation short-term rental annual renewal of $200. And that's missing from this one, but this one has a wait list fee that wasn't on the other one. So I'm just wondering, do we miss that renewal?
I think based on the feedback we heard, what we thought, and certainly we're open to your interpretation and change, but we thought that was too low. The feedback we received on short-term rental annual, the licensing fee that we had in there was too low, so we moved it to $350. And if you look at the comparables, it's in line with with what other communities around us are charging. So we were on the low side.
This is just my misread, because in the old one, it said annual renewal, and this one, it just says annually, so that's my misread.
Anything else? Council, anything else? Mr. Moore.
The only one thought here, since we already approved this as part of the budget in the last meeting, it occurred to me that the resolution should say that this is the amended schedule.
Okay.
Is that okay?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Anything else, council? Mr. Shields.
I'll make a motion that we propose approve the amended 2024 schedule of fees and charges.
Thank you, Mr. Shields. Mr. Moore.
Support.
So I have a motion from Mr. Shields and a second from Mr. Moore on the adoption of proposed ordinance approving the 2024 schedule of fees and charges. Does the public wish to weigh in on this? There being none, there's a chat? Is there somebody's hand up there, a chat?
Oh, Rhonda, she just said, thank you, as you are well represented by Jim. I will sign off. Have a good night.
Okay. I just needed to make sure it wasn't somebody. There's no further public comment. I go to the city clerk back for roll.
Shields.
Yes.
Demore.
Aye.
Wagner. Walker.
Yes.
Murphy.
Yes. Next is the adoption of a proposed resolution that would approve the City of Petoskey volunteer board and commission policy as it relates to the redevelopment ready communities RRC recertification process. I go to city manager Horn for this.
Thank you, Mayor. This is a carry forward from last meeting. Just trying to work through the recertification as a redevelopment ready community. Number of items that we're working through. This is one of them where best practices say within the program that we need to have a volunteer board and commission policy, as well as setting forth the desired skill set that we would like to see within these boards and commissions. Try to be fairly generic and not too necessarily specific. Some of this language actually is a carry forward from the previous manager and planner that I have moved forward. So again, trying to move through the recertification process through RRC. This, if it's approved, would be represented on our website, and hopefully one of the things that we got hit on during our audit was it didn't seem like it was visible enough for people to go to and see if they were particularly interested in, just say, planning commission. What is that involved? What are the skill sets that we may be looking for that would help facilitate being a valued board member on the planning commission? And then the process, how do we do that? What is the application? Where is that located on our website? So having that more visible.
Mr. Moore.
So while I understand that this policy content is not at the same level of gravitas as the short-term rentals or the incentive policy, with due respect, I just don't support creating, a cut and paste policy in order to check a box. I understand this is a part of the redevelopment ready communities application, which I fully support. So right after our last meeting, because honestly, for me, looking at this, I don't know if these are accurate, inaccurate. I just don't know. I suggested that we do a simple outreach email to current board and commission members to get their input on the descriptors that apply to their specific service. These volunteers are on the front lines of board commission service, and to my mind, they have valuable information about their roles and functions. To have a meaningful policy, that input should be considered and incorporated to the extent it provides a fuller picture of their service and role. I genuinely see this as an opportunity for us. Not only would it inform the policy, it would provide information for the public about board and commission service. The mayor often says he can't find people to serve. There was nothing online that I could find about these descriptors at all. So it may help to publish a meaningful description of the positions online. Finally, one of our overarching goals that we've established is citizen engagement. People serving on boards and commission are our frontline citizen volunteers. This is a clear opportunity to reach out for meaningful engagement, and it's to my mind, not hard to do. Maybe their input would confirm all that's here, but without that, we don't know. So to me, in short, why wouldn't we make this policy the best that it can be? Thank you for listening.
Ms. Walker.
Thank you, Mayor. I agree with what Tina is suggesting as well. I will approve, or I feel like my feelings about this are tonight, I would approve this for the sake of the redevelopment ready communities, the necessity to have that in place. But anybody that works with the state of Michigan knows that diversity, equity, inclusion, and access are a guiding principle in state government, and to have nothing about bringing in or encouraging like the diversity is what makes our community rich, and that we want to have our boards and commissions reflect economic diversity, social diversity, cultural diversity. So diversity, equity, inclusion, and access means like that everybody should have a chance to participate. And so I think we're a little remiss in not highlighting DEIA, because any state government was already part of that. And MEDC is run by a man of color. So like to not have something in that language included in your MEDC grants is probably a bit of a lack of understanding about the importance of those initiatives in state government in the state of Michigan. That being said, if this is about checking the box off, I'm fine with that, because you have to have that as part of redevelopment ready. I would be fine of approving that, but I would also be remiss if I didn't mention something that I would love to see a volunteer board and commission policy that exists for the city of Petoskey and on our website be more comprehensive and inclusive and have better language and be reflective of what those boards and commissioners that are currently serving, how they see their role. So that's what I wanted to share.
Is there a statement that you feel is missing there that does not address inclusion?
I think that you can just take like standard language from the MED website, probably has something, and I did not look at the MED website in anticipation of this meeting, so I apologize for that. But DEIA is like an initiative that's in state government everywhere, so there's probably already some uniform language, and I don't know if maybe some of the other redevelopment ready communities have that inclusive in their language, and we could borrow from that template. That was the only thing I wanted to share.
I will say this, that our boards and commissions are spread right now, and I took over 7 years ago. It's now 50% female, 50% male. It's also spread out more than ever before on of the 4 boards that we have. I have made sure to try to include wards 3 and 4, which were under identified on boards and commissions in the city. So I think that we have taken a big step forward in that inclusionary and in that participating piece. If you believe that there's something that should be put in boilerplate, as you talked about, I know Tina will say no cut and paste, but if you believe that there's something on the state website that we could include into this, I'm fine with that. But as you say, this is kind of like RRC wants this.
Yeah, I get it.
Let's do this, and then let's revisit. I don't have a problem with revisiting it, because I think the city of Petoskey is demonstrating inclusion and diversity whenever possible. Mr. Shields.
I have a question for Mr. Moore, just to clarify what your comment there. Are you are you thinking this would be like a work session type of opportunity for developing this further, or are there or was it more just time to solicit comments from the volunteers who are already in these committees?
I'm open to ideas, but knowing the timeline we had for this, which I understand, I think got extended some.
It's been extended once already to the end of the year. I would have to ask for another.
All I was looking for was an email outreach, email blast to everybody on boards and commissions saying, hey, we're putting this together. Look at the section that applies to you. How does it look? Any ideas, any input? For this purpose, that's what I was looking for. I just don't know the world of all this, if it's accurate, inaccurate, and I'm always a believer that people on the front lines are the ones that have an understanding of what the job is. So to make it meaningful, that was my idea.
Thanks for clarification.
Thank you.
I think it needs to have an input from city council as well. We are the ones that I appoint, you approve or support. I think it's very important for us to have an input in this as well, not just the boards and commissions.
Agree.
Okay. But for this purpose, because it is the first of the year deadline, I don't believe that there's enough turnaround time to get this back, to bring it to city council, unless you feel different. You wish to make a motion or something. Otherwise, I entertain the opportunity for a motion on this. Mr. Wagner.
I feel obliged to say something. I agree. I mean, Tina at the last meeting talked about the importance of policy and goal and setting policy, and that's an important thing. And I think I said at the end of that meeting, I think this is the policy, but not to the letter of the law today. And it's almost like taking something that's policy and making it look good for a website. That said, that's not taking the policy very seriously. And so I'm in favor of moving it forward, and getting it done to meet the needs of the program. However, I'd like some commitment that we could relook at this policy and modify it, early in the new year, whatever that timing is.
Sounds great. So you're making a motion, are you? Is that what you said? I don't.
So I did. There was a count, but I have a motion to approve the document as written.
Okay.
I don't think we made any modifications.
I'll be happy to second the
I
motion.
have a motion from Mr. Wagner, a second from Ms. Walker. Council, any other discussions? Mr. Shields.
Just quick comments, the things that is, when I quick look through this, I would love us to discuss in the future on this are the creation of new boards and commissions. Maybe that could be something we discuss as part of this. And then I had smaller comments that I will look forward to addressing at some future time.
I think that's two issues. One is you want to expand more commissions. And the other one is reviewing this, and I think that's two separate processes, really.
Okay.
But whatever you guys are looking at. Any other discussion? Does the public wish to weigh in on this? There being none, I take it to Ms. Beck for roll.
Wagner,
Yes.
Walker.
Yes.
Zamore,
Nay.
Shields.
Yes.
Murphy.
Yes, motion passes 4-1. And again, city manager will in the future put this on for a special meeting or
We can just keep it.
regular city council meeting.
I think so.
Okay. We'll delve into it there. Last on the agenda, and next to last, is a discussion regarding city manager performance evaluation process. I don't know if you want to lead the discussion on it. You've had experience. Firing squad and to be hard. Which you first, the firing squad, hanging, or quarterly? Jim.
Well, I mean, it's in your package. There's two forms, but there's also the form that your predecessor council approved. So I'm not sure what you're seeking from me right now.
I'm not seeking anything. You know, back to, I just thought somebody looked at you and said, Jim.
I take no private authorship in, I didn't draft the first evaluation form. That goes back when it first started.
Well, we had a revision when I was involved and I was not happy with that one. I think we got into the number count, did we, on numbers?
Yeah, I know, but the form's been around. These forms look fine too. So I mean, there's always been discussion by council. They didn't like the existing form.
Well, I think
So
part of it, like with numbers is, you know.
that's fine. And, you know, just
You
since
can't
we're-
address the meat of a discussion when you're saying, well, that's a number 2.5 and this one's a 3.6. Yay, you know, Mr. Wagner.
And just one last, if I may, keep in mind, you know, council, when you do the evaluation, you do it as a whole, you're a public body.
Very good.
It's not 5 individuals, and so sometimes there's glowing. You know, too favorable or too unfavorable by one member of council. So you need 3 votes, and then that becomes the evaluation. But there's certainly different forms and ways to do it. But we try and do it as meaningfully as possible and objectively as possible, so it doesn't get terribly subjective with 1 or 2 members of council.
So throwing out my piece and then I'll call him Mr. Wagner. The first one of the 2 in the packet, I believe our city manager has experienced use of both of these, I believe.
Yeah, I've been evaluated using both of these systems that are in the packet. And again, as city attorney mentioned, there's so many varieties of evaluation systems that are out there and available. And I know Mr. Councilmember Wagner talked about a 360 as well. So there's just a number of options to choose.
I like this one without the second one personally, just because it's got away from numbers. I don't feel numbers aggressive it.
Is our own?
Yeah, they've got numbers too.
This one? Oh, I guess it does. Yeah, I'm in favor of eliminating numbers and checking a box if you feel that there's an issue that needs to be addressed. Mr. Wagner.
Thanks, Mayor. I think the mayor and I spoke about this however many years ago now that we weren't happy with it. Part of the old form. There were things we were rating that were just, we didn't see what went on day to day. We couldn't, I like both of these, actually. I think almost everything except maybe on the second form, the supervision question, there were some things there. You know, if we're not seeing it, we're not part of it, it just doesn't even make sense for us to rate, but the number thing, I know John and I have disagreed a little bit on it, we've never really discussed it, but I'm a real believer that the numbers allow you to say, okay, so on your one question 2, 4 of us gave it a 5 and 1 of us gave it a 2. Let's discuss that. But if all of us rated a 4, there's less need for discussion. It grounds the discussion in something quantitative. But and that said, I know so I was talking about a 360. Shane undergoes a certification process that requires a certification that's happening in a couple of years. I'd be fine not having the 360 piece, which was really only about Shane picking like 2 of his direct reports to participate. And if that doesn't get support, I'm okay with it. And I prefer the first form just on brevity and but the comments piece is really important. It's just not the quantitative rating.
Mr. Moore.
I too prefer the first form because it gives the opportunity for some explanation right following the numbers. Because I'm not a big fan of the numbers either. And to me, I guess for myself at least, the comments are more meaningful than a number and trying to understand if somebody has a constructive comment or a compliment or whatever, just makes it more clear. So, and I think following up on Brian's comments too, just as long as we're not being asked to evaluate something we can't observe. If we can't observe it, I don't want to be in a position to try to evaluate that. And then I guess just one follow-up, because this would be my first time doing it in this context, not like at the school district, which I did a number of times. I guess I'm so used to, like, if I have a problem with Jim, I talk directly to Jim. So the fact that this is all morphed together, that's a requirement legally because I just think it's important if somebody has a constructive comment for me, they can offer it to me directly and they know where it comes from and there can be dialogue. But in this process, I'm understanding it has to be all,
Well, if it's a formal evaluation from council, then yes.
all clumped together.
Once a year.
Once a
Yeah,
year.
hopefully the one-on-ones happen. Anyway.
And so, Tina, because you haven't been involved in the process, you know, the comments, for example. The comments, everyone's comments have to be approved by a majority of the council. Because why the evaluation is a, you know, a message from council, not each individual. So that's a tough process as well, coupled with I'll throw in a little law, you know, that the manager does have rights and they can go into a closed session and the manager typically does. There's a whole host of other laws, name clearing, and you know, it can be a productive process and it can be an awfully challenging process. Trying to keep it on the productive side in the city of Petoskey.
Of course, because we all like do our own comments and then we turn.
Yes, it is a practice, and again, it's a practice, it's not required by law, the practice and to protect again confidentiality and comply with open meetings and everything, but each council person has done their own, submitted it to my office. We are mere tabulators, you know, we don't evaluate it, we just do the scores. So you take the numbers and you divide by 5 to come up with an average. And then we produce a kind of a summary of that. And then you go into closed session and review it. And then in an open session is when council has to say yes, you know, someone ultimately makes a motion to say this is our form. But and then you need a second, and like any other motion.
I believe in the past, what we did with the comments was they were listed underneath each of the sections.
Yes,
They're
listed.
the initial of the person that put those in.
Yes, so
We're discussing so that everybody would say, does he eat green bananas? And everybody says no, or 2 people say, we say not, and we get in
yeah, John's right. Oftentimes, council people, in my experience, would just say, I don't need my comments in there. I spoke with the manager, or it's redundant, and more often it's just redundant. You know, it's the comments seem to say the same thing, but just maybe use different words, terminology.
So we wordsmith it to come up with, is that statement right there one that we want in the evaluation? Is it a concern to all of us? Or is it one that we want to cross off?
So when it comes back from you, all the comments are there.
Yes.
And then we meet in. a
Well, really, it's most often a closed session with a manager.
We go something without him.
Okay.
After we've come up with them.
But you're not making the decision in the closed session, you're just going over the evaluation process. And oftentimes, I'll even bring a computer, and again, I act as scrivener, not weighing in on this, and hear what everyone's saying and try and summarize what I think people are saying. And it may not be accurate, but then you get back into the open session. But if someone in that closed session, Brian says, well, you know, my comments are the same as Tina's, so I don't need to just take mine out. And we don't personalize it because they wouldn't be your comments, they would be council's.
I was just trying to understand, like you were talking about doing an amalgam of the numbers, which makes perfect sense. But I was trying to understand how we have dialogue on the comments, so.
In usually the evaluation with the manager.
The dialogue is the most important part of it, because that's where you get to what you were talking about away from the numbers and into the discussion of what is it that you want to see the city manager feel good about? What do you feel you feel is deficit or needs some communications or work? That's where the communication part of it, the listing comes in.
And my concerns maybe make more sense, which we, thank goodness we haven't had in the city of Petoskey, but when you kind of have a rogue, to be honest, councilor person or two that are way high or way too low, they're just not indicative of what the majority of council wants. It's not fair to a manager to have this disparity of comments just because one person is anti, and it can be on a policy. It could be that they're not happy about a zoning decision and now they're taking it out on an evaluation form. So we try and not have that occur. And the way to do that is, again, you speak as a.
Thank you.
Ms. Walker.
It's also, because you're doing the evaluation on your own in isolation. And it's not until you come together, do you realize how everybody else feels? Or what the aggregated data will tell you after it's been accumulated, so. It's a very interesting process. So just, yeah, how do I say this? So up until the point where you are doing the evaluation yourself at home and, you know, or wherever you choose to do so, you're doing so in isolation, but there's also an assumption that you're talking to your fellow city council folks outside one-on-one in anticipation of this. But you really don't know where people are at as a collective group until you're in that room together. And you see the data that's been aggregated by legal counsel. And then the comments are also, and that's where you have the opportunity for discussion. And it's really only there. Because there's not, I mean, there could be some that can happen in advance, but not always.
But it does start with the form.
Do you wish to, somebody wish to motion on which of the forms you'd like to use at this point?
Well, I remember the last one that we used in the last incarnation, and I'm wondering if.
You don't need a motion, but what I need is a consensus. I'm sorry.
Okay.
The word shouldn't have been motion, but it should have been consensus. Lindsay, please.
Oh, there was some language about intergovernmental work and like work with the media and some other folks that would be outside of like city council city manager kind of a part of a city manager's job and description, but I didn't see that in this next form.
Which form are you saying that you like then?
Form 1 is the one that I like. Yes, I agree with what others had said, that Form 1 seems to be the most comprehensive and similar. And I like the fact that you get to add the comments. But I would like to see something about intergovernmental. Maybe that's under community relations, so that could be an extra question, or maybe just an extra part of a sentence that would be like, how does the manager perform with dealing with others in other governmental relations outside of our own entity?
We could add that. This form is basically our form. If you wish to say, I would like this added and I'll make a motion with this included as a possibility. Is there something that you would like to? A piece that you would like to put in here?
So thanks, Mayor, for clarifying that. Yes, I think that maybe under under section 4, community relations in the first form, which would be something about intergovernmental work.
DE, so E.
Yes, please.
Could you give us
Community relations demonstrates an ability to work with other governmental entities outside of the city.
Demonstrates
the ability to work intergovernmentally or outside with other governments outside of our own.
Is council, are you good with that statement, or do you want to change it or add to it?
I support.
Mr. Shields.
Thank you, Mayor. I support.
You like that
addition? Yes.
Thank you for wordsmithing.
Mr. Shields. Mr. Wagner, I'm good. Okay. Please.
Well, once again, I don't know if this is kosher, but I'll bring it up now. I mean, in terms of community outreach, Shane's sitting right next to us, so my inclination would be to say he's looking at this. Are there any things he thinks are missing or should be here? Is that?
That's kosher. That's a great.
Community engagement.
Is there anything in here that you would like to add?
Yeah, or that you know, any thoughts or input
No, I think this form, I've used this form several times in another location, so I'm comfortable with it. I think it takes in a lot of my responsibilities and one thing I would recommend us do, just from a simplicity standpoint, is if it's Form 1, we can make this fillable to you, so you can just use it at your computer. At your leisure, fill it in very simply, and then obviously send it on to Jim's office.
Okay, so does that sound good?
Yes.
Okay, so Sarah will email it to us as an attachment. And include the email address that we are to send it back to. How's that?
And then I guess we just need to have a deadline and kind of what next steps may look like from a schedule.
I can just resurrect I have a legal opinion for the benefit of Tina and any of you who may have forgotten, but it kind of summarizes the process.
That'd be great.
Please.
So I usually send that every year.
Would you send that to Sarah to include in there?
Sure.
Or Sarah can send the fillable.
I typically just send it directly to all of you.
Okay, so Sarah, you send the stuff to, you send the stuff.
Because this is on Sarah's system, you can go make the change and then send it to me. But Sarah and I work well together, so we'll get the.
Really good.
Paper copies too, right?
You can, anything you want.
Yep.
I think last time we did paper copies, to be honest with you, we sent back paper copies, I believe, so. Moving on, so we've got a consensus on it, you're all good, any other questions on that? Very good.
Just one thing.
Yes.
Well, time wise, I just want to, we have a little runway here because it's the holidays and there's a lot. Fridays, this is Saturday.
Before Christmas. Can we have it, you could do it Christmas Eve, or do you want New Year's Eve? Okay, let's look at the calendar and come up with a date. It's the 4th right now of December.
What date for what though? Deadline to?
They're gonna send this out to you sometime this week.
Okay.
I guess maybe you should figure which meeting you want to do this and then back it up from there.
That's probably a good idea.
How about if we do it on
The meetings in January, to remind you, are the 8th and.
Do you want to have it back the weekend of January 1st week, like the 4th, 3rd, the 3rd?
No.
No? You want a month to do this?
No.
Well, if you go to the 15th and you're doing it, it's gonna take you 5 weeks to get this done. I would think that we could have this back to Jim in less than 5 weeks. You know, you have something you want to say?
No, I submit.
No, what is your suggestion, Tina?
No, I don't have one. There's just a lot with the holidays and everything, but
So-
if everybody thinks they can have it done by the 5th,
Did you say January 15th? Are you picking the meeting date first?
I was gonna pick the meeting date and back up from there.
And are you picking the 15th, January?
If I'm doing the 15th, and you guys have a month.
Doing the 8th, 22nd.
there's something.
You have the 8th and the 22nd, sorry, it's a little bit of a different cycle in January.
I entered the old dates in my calendar. There I am.
Second.
So you have 6 weeks to get it back to Jim. Is that, I think that's a little long. I mean,
It probably is, but I'll just full disclosure, I think I'm out. I have a conflict on the 8th.
So you guys have 5 weeks, you'll have 5 weeks to get it to Jim on his evaluation.
And do it the 22nd.
Put it on the 22nd. I can't believe that. I can't believe that it's gonna take us 5 weeks for people to fill this form out.
Yeah, what do you want your deadline to be for you, Tricia?
I'm gonna send that in the outline. I'm gonna outline what your deadline, but it takes a little longer than you think to, not to pick on council, because I would never do that. But sometimes some council members don't get it back right away.
Well, they will get paid. Not that there's enough to worry about that, to be careful anyway. Okay, so I guess we're on the 22nd. You send it out sometime in the next 5 weeks and we'll get it back in the next 6 weeks. We're good. Well, that's what it is. It's 7 weeks actually from here. Okay, city council comments starting with Miss Walker on
No
Ward
comments, Mayor.
4.
Thank you much.
Ward 3.
For all our friends of the Jewish faith, happy Hanukkah starting Thursday.
Okay, Mr. Shields.
As a representative of largely residential ward, I want to just emphasize how well-being also includes the well-being of our commercial districts. And so being out at the open house, downtown open house, and seeing everybody down there, I just want to thank our local business owners and for just making this place special and showing up and inviting all of us into your stores. That's great. Thank you.
Great. Ward 1, Mr. Moore.
Just one quick thing I found, and you probably already know about this, every one of you, but I, in my spare time, was looking through ordinances, and there is actually a definition of affordable housing. And it is housing that meets the current U.S. State Department of Housing and Urban Development criteria. HUD criteria, already in there. It's all like that.
Let's see. My turn. I had the opportunity to go into Sheridan School, second grades with 41 second graders. Visiting them for an hour, hour and a half. And then I see them showing up at the Christmas lighting, and 5 of them came up with parents to say, hey. So, you know, and what's kind of cool is there's a girl who said, I really want to be a policeman. Can a girl be a policeman? And I said, sure. So they are going to be coming down to City Hall, coming here, taking a turn sitting up here, having a chance to say, should we have fireworks all the time, or and why? Why not? But also, when they go over, we set up with Rocky, our city public safety director, to visit the fire station, and I'm going to make sure and ask him if he would have a female police officer there for these 1 or 2 girls that think they want to be policemen, because I said, you know, it isn't just a guy, it's not a policeman, it can be a policewoman as well. So I think this is really great that the schools are opening their doors and want people from the community to come in and participate and try to motivate kids in the educational careers as well as city. The other thing is September 15th and 16th, put your holiday lights on. December, what did I say? September. You can tell it's been 3 hours, over 3. I go fall apart after 3. But we have a holiday light contest again. We have seven businesses that have given $100 gift cards for meals, restaurants. The 15th and 16th, have your lights on, and Kiwanis people will be driving around and making judgments on it. If you're interested in getting in a car and doing that, get a hold of me, because we kind of just make it open to people as well. So that being said, it's also on the city website, thanks to Sarah. These people will have a sign in their yard that says, you know, outstanding Griswold or tree or something like that. So no further business come for this council. I would like to say thank you, John. Thank you, Jim, for showing up these late hours. Thank you for participating. Have safe holidays. Merry Christmas. Happy holidays. This meeting's adjourned.